Maybe that's a sign we should get started. What do you think?
I think so.
Okay, great. Well, good to see everyone virtually. Welcome to our Colorado Forest Health Council February meeting. There's definitely a lot going on, and this agenda really reflects that. We'll be busy looking at kind of our past and future legislative priorities, the 30-year vision. Look forward to hearing updates from our legislative and our leveraging resources committee. Um, so it looks like we just have a great agenda. So I'm really excited to dive into these items. And before we jump into roll call and seeing who's here, I also I'm very confident he's not going to be able to make it because I'm sure he's busy at the Capitol. I could be wrong if we see his name anywhere, but I want to welcome a new member to the committee, Representative Larry Don Sukla. Larry Don, he's been a longtime friend. We were actually county commissioners that worked closely together for many years. Um, and was he and Larry was elected as a state rep. I can't remember his house district, but it's more or less like the whole. It's a huge geographical area, just like the whole kind of Southwest that heads up in towards I want to say Montrose counties and Gunnison counties, but quite a few different counties. And so I look forward to working with Representative Sukla as he's able to participate. So with that, let's go through roll call. I'll just I see a lot of folks here, but I'll name the names anyways. So I see Matt McCombs. Good to see you, our state forester.
Present, Mr. Director.
Great, good to see you. Mike Morgan, or I know Vaughn. I see Vaughn there, and I think Mike was going to be in and out too. So Mike or Vaughn, I see Vaughn. So good to see you, Vaughn.
Tag team it.
Great. Troy Heathactor, a regional forester, or a representative from the U.S. Forest Service. Okay. John Ring.
Yep, present.
Okay. Good to see you, John. Frank Falzone.
Present.
Okay, Frank. Good to see you. I see Samantha Albert. Good to see you, Samantha.
Thanks, Director.
Commissioner Abe Layden was not going to be able to make it today, but we do have Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally.
Present, Mr. Director. Thank you.
Good to see you. Commissioner Clyde Church, I believe, is here. Did I see
Yes,
Clyde?
here.
Okay, great. Good to see you. Commissioner Veronica Medina. Okay, I don't think she's joined yet. I think we have Katie McGrath Novak. I see
Here.
Katie. There
Good
we go,
morning.
Katie. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Brett Wolk. I think Brett's here, right? No? Okay. Madeline McDonald.
Present. Good morning.
Okay. Good morning. It looks like we do have Kevin with the U.S. Forest Service. Thanks for joining us, Kevin. Uh, Amy Moyer's here from the River District.
Yep, here. Hi, everyone.
Good to see Amy, virtually at least. Mark Morgan, I believe, is here. Good to see you,
I'm
Mark.
here.
Hope you're well. Paige Lewis.
I'm here. Good morning.
Oh, there we go, Paige. Good to see you, Paige. Okay, Lynn Elliott.
Present. Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Julie Stencil's here. Good to see you,
Good
Julie.
morning.
Pat Dorsey. Is Pat here? I bet Pat will probably join a little bit later. And then I'm very confident, again, the legislative session's going on, but Senator Cutter, I'm very confident, probably couldn't make it. And then I mentioned Representative Larry Don Suckla. Um, I'm sure they'll participate once they're able to after legislative session. So how are we looking on numbers, Courtney?
We're looking great. We certainly have quorum. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Okay, great. Um, Before we move to next agenda item number 2, I just want to also, these meetings, even though they're virtual, they definitely take a lot of time to kind of put together and everything. So I want to give a special appreciation to Courtney, Roberta, and Allison on my team, especially Courtney. So thank you for all your work of, putting all this together, the agendas and working on who's here and who's not and all that stuff. So just a big thank you for that. Appreciate that. Next up, we have approval of our October 30th agenda meeting. That was sent out. And what we need is have a motion for approval of those minutes, if folks are okay with what you see.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the minutes as presented in the packet.
I'd second that motion.
Okay, thank you for moving that and seconding that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify saying as aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay, ayes carry it, so we are okay with those, with what we have for the agenda here. Let's see, next, we have pass, recommended, and supporting bills. So the council has developed and supported many bills over the last few years. And as we are working towards this new legislative session, we really wanted to do a check-in on some of the bills that the council has engaged with in the past, and kind of walk through kind of the outcome of those and where we're at. So James Lucero with the State Forest Service has graciously agreed to be the lead on that. So let me turn it over to James to walk us through that.
Thanks, Director. I'm putting a list of bills right now into the chat that Allison has asked me to touch base on and just wanting you guys to have those numbers. That way everybody knows which bills we're talking about. Perfect. So going down the line, starting, I think, with the bill that this council is most familiar with, Senate Bill 5 from 2023. This was the first workforce development bill that this council had suggested and was moved forward. Basically, this bill is done. The implementation is ongoing, and we have a lot of good work to really just say, this is what we did. So as a quick reminder, what Senate Bill 5 did in the workforce kind of capacity space was it gave money for institutions of higher education to expand or to create new forestry programs. That money was allocated last year, and those new programs are up and running. Many of them are showing strong success. Another great thing that happened from that bill was one simulator was actually be able to be purchased. That was purchased down south by I think it was Pueblo Community College in conjunction with CSU Pueblo. So that is up and running. But the other thing that's been really successful and is still in the works is the industry internships. So these aren't internships that the State Forest Service actually does. These are going out to industry, into the timber space and into everything forestry related. And then money was given to the State Forest Service for companies to then reach out, they hire the interns, and then part of that money is actually reimbursed from the state. And so last year, Director Gibbs actually talked about this briefly on our SMART Act hearing. Last year, we were able to reimburse 10 internships, and there is still money that's going to be allocated for internships reimbursement into this current year. So that has been really successful. And we're continuing to watch those internships come in and see how they can be used to further some of these careers. The second bill on that list is 1060. As a quick reminder, that one was the second bill that gave additional money to update our seedling tree nursery. The really great thing about this bill is actually I'm over here in this computer screen watching the Senate, because they are due to pass Senate Bill 25115, which is a continuation of spending authority. So the good news is we have finally done our demolition. There is no more greenhouses in Fort Collins, and we are starting to take down some of that stuff. So the demolition has started, and we're planning for kind of really starting the work of building this starting in around late February, early March. Everything is going to go according to schedule. We've now got authority to spend our money into 2027. And so I'm kind of watching over here to make sure that that bill passes. I'm not anticipating any funny business, but that's where 1060 is. Demo is happening, and we're going to start construction here very, very soon. 1069 is a bit of an interesting bill. Basically, what this bill did was it gave CSU it gave CSU the authority to conduct a study on whether biochar would be an effective use to plug oil and gas wells. That's basically what the bill said was, hey, CSU, we want you to study this. And after you study it, if you think there is a possibility to go ahead and do that, we would love for you to bring forward recommendations on how to implement that. And that is the step that we are actually in right now. The study group met, they did all of their research, and they came to the conclusion that yes, more work needs to be done, and we do think that there is a viable way for this to move forward. And so Amanda West Fordham from our CSFS team is actually on that committee, and she's been really helping lead that charge coming from that standpoint. And basically where we are now is they have released their recommendation outline that is saying, this is what we think we need to do in order to make this happen. Here's all of our suggestions. So that actual recommendation has been sent out, and we're waiting for feedback on what those next steps are. But that one is moving. Everything is going according to plan, and we're waiting to see really, is that recommendation public? I don't know yet because it's not. Let me rephrase that. It is not public yet because I still think it's going through the kind of checks and balances to make sure that this is going to be viable. I think once that is public, I'm sure I can send that to Courtney and we can get that to everybody. But that's where that bill is. So it's moving forward. We just don't know. This could be the final stop if they say no, thank you, or there could be some more progress in moving towards what those next steps are going to be. And so then coming into last year, these are a few of the bills I wanted to highlight, starting with House Bill 1006. This was a bill that really started from this committee, and it was really championed by the Wildfire Review Committee in making sure that our rural counties and smaller counties had the same kind of like resources and ability to navigate the super complex network of grants that are available at both the state level and the federal level. So what this bill did was it provided a one-time appropriation to the State Forest Service where third-party NGOs can reach out to us and say, hey, we know of this smaller rural county or this disproportionately disadvantaged county. There's work that needs to be done, but they don't have grant writers or they don't have actual boots on the ground to get this work done. We would like to partner with you in order to get that work done. And so that's what that bill is doing. Currently, where this bill is in process is we have a program manager set to start to manage that with recommendations due by March in order to actually fully implement it. So we're ready to hit the ground running in March, and those recommendations are currently being created right now in the State Forest Service, along with the partners in that bill that were identified in statute to be a part of that creation process. Senate Bill 241024 is another extension bill from Senate Bill 22007. So 22007 created this campaign, and ultimately it became the Live Wildfire Ready campaign, and it was a public outreach and education campaign that is teaching individual landowners how to best prepare their parcels and their homes to be best prepared for wildfire. A lot of that is taking our home ignition zone guidelines and putting it into readable formats. We had radio ads. We had a few video ads. I think I was able to share some of those video ads with you. 1024 was just additional money given to keep that program up and running since it was so successful. Where that bill is in the process right now is that bill is currently within the State Forest Service. We're holding on to that money until May because May is Wildfire Awareness Month again, and that's where we're planning on spending the last dollars that the General Assembly appropriated to us. A really successful campaign. The last bill that I wanted to talk about was Senate Bill 9. Unfortunately, this was the bill that this committee had suggested that was county slash days. It was saying, hey, we want individual landowners to do your mitigation work. And part of the biggest challenge in doing that is like, how do you get rid of that slash that is created from the mitigation work that you do as an individual landowner? This created a pilot program for a few counties in Colorado to initiate these slash pickup days, where there is an opportunity for you to take your slash and dispose of it in a correct way. This was it had strong support from both the House and the Senate. It made it completely through the House. It made it completely through the Senate. It unfortunately stalled in the House when we were running into funding problems because the state budget is so tight. We're continuing to see that this year, and so some of the bills that we're tracking this year are facing some battles just because of that budget. But it had a very strong support on both sides of the aisle and in both chambers. It just ran into a funding problem. So those are the bills that Allison has asked me to update you guys on. I went through those a little quickly, but I'm happy to take any questions on any of those from all of you.
Great, James. Thanks so much for working through that whole list here. Questions? I see a few thumbs up. Any
I see two questions.
Yeah, let's go
Director.
maybe Clyde.
Yeah, just wondering, is there anything in the legislature for home hardening?
There was one. There was a bill. It was in 2023. It gave a very small amount of money to the Division of Fire Protection and Fire Prevention and DFPC, Fire Prevention and Control, to small individual grants for people to do their own home hardening. That was successful. It was a very small amount of money, but there was nothing currently right now for like actual home hardening.
I think the messaging and communications, education is a strong part. And we're starting to push that here in Southwest Colorado. So if there's anything, not necessarily funding the homeowner, but funding the communications and the public education.
I agree.
Next up, we have Katie and then Amy.
Yeah, just quick question. For Senate Bill 2409, when you say that stalled, is there any chance that they might bring that back, or is it just kind of gone now?
Technically, the bill is gone. It would have to be reintroduced into this legislative session as the same bill or a very similar bill. But for right now, that concept, I haven't seen it introduced this session. So it is, unfortunately, it's not looking like it's going to be introduced or reintroduced this year.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, James. These updates are really helpful. I had a question on 1006, the Rural Grant Navigator program. Can you walk me through again the status of that program? You said there was a program manager scheduled to get going by March, but I think where I missed was, have you already received the recommendations for the program criteria and how that's going to operate? Or just remind me where the status is. I got a little lost. Thank you.
No worries. And I could have misspoke. So that's actually what we're working on. So this program manager is starting to develop those recommendations for implementation with those partners that are also identified in the bill. I think it was 3 different counties, 3 small rural counties. And I think the Division of Fire Protection and DFPC and the governor's office, all those entities are due to start meeting to create those recommendations. Those recommendations are due in March. So that's where we are, is we're currently in that process. That way we can be ready to send those out and start implementing should those be approved or needs to get worked on.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, any other questions before we move to the next item?
There's one more in the chat, Director Gibbs.
Okay, great.
Brett, that's a good question. We actually are modeling ours off of the Community Navigator process. When this idea kind of stemmed within our agency, the first people that we looked to was those people to get input from them. And so I think they're definitely parallel in that we're modeling that same model. And I think we're doing the best that we can to make sure that there is not a duplication of efforts or overlap. But that's basically where we are, is like, hey, we see this model working. Let's see if we can take it and expand it a little bit more as another process in that toolkit.
Okay, Jody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, James. Great synopsis. And I think it's great for us to reflect on some of the work that we've done. And I'm wondering, is there a place for this on the website just to kind of tell our story about the work and some of the progress we've made? We're kind of still newer or reorganized. And I think if we're not telling our story and some of the work we're doing, someone might be telling it for us and for us. And I think as I will present here in a little bit, education and showing some of the legislature or whoever's looking, some of the partnership and collaboration and work we've done might be a good way to help us gain some more support for some of these things that when we have to push for funding and things. I'm just curious and just a thought. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Any more comments or questions? Before we move it back to Jody actually now to talk about a few of the bills that the Legislative Committee is tracking and we want to give you an update on. I want to welcome to the Deputy Regional Forester for Region 2, Delgado, who is here with us. And so is it Andrea or Andrea?
The first time.
What is it?
Andrea.
Okay, great. I want to turn it over to you to introduce yourself and anything you want to share and just see if there are any questions for you too, possibly. Yeah. So thanks for
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and good morning, everyone. I'm here today to represent the Rocky Mountain Regional Foresters team. And before I continue my remarks, I'll say that I want the record to show that no one asked Kevin to depart the meeting. We currently have an overlapping regional leadership team call that he has to be on. It's part of the reason why Troy and others can be on this call as well. So what I hear is that this is a great group of folks, and we sincerely look forward to continuing the important work in partnership that previous leaders have been able to provide. As Dan mentioned, and for your situational and awareness, the entire Rocky Mountain team at the leadership level is new. We're less than a year old, some of us just a couple of weeks, from a regional forester to the 3 deputy regional foresters. Troy Heithaker is the regional forester, and in the DRF team, we have Bunny Maceo, Cherie Hamilton, and yours truly. I'd be happy to send additional information providing a breakdown of the portfolios that we handle, but Either way, we will ensure that there's consistent participation in these important quarterly meetings. If folks are wondering about me, I'm going to be entering my 4th month with the region. I came from the department where I served as Chief of Staff for Natural Resources and Environment, overseeing the Forest Service. So I've worked on several of these issues at the national level and getting familiarized with the regional issues in the past coming months. So look forward to working with all of you. I'll put my email in the chat for anyone that wants to reach out. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks again for joining us. We're lucky to have you in this region. And I assume you're in Colorado, but I know you could probably
Yes.
live anywhere in the region. But yeah, okay, great. Awesome. Well, next, let's move it to Commissioner Jody Shack McNally, who will tell us about what's going on underneath the Gold Dome right now and a few of the bills that I know that you're tracking very closely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Director. I appreciate everyone, and hi, I'm Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shack McNally. I chair the Legislative Committee, and I will be sharing some of the recommendations. But first, we wanted to talk about the bills that are currently in the legislature, and I've been down at the Capitol a couple of times already and had some conversations. But as we all know, the 2025 legislative priorities approved last year are actually some bills that are in currently together. So first, I want to just kind of give some background. When we presented the council's approved 2025 legislative priorities, there was a bill that was taken up by the Wildfire Matters Interim Committee, and that was a very popular and strongly supported legislative priority from the Legislative Committee and from the Council. That was the Workforce and Education Partnership with CSU Extension and 4-H to pilot some programs for some counties and having some internships and expanding kind of a land stewardship, natural resources, firefighting, wildfire, forestry, internships and programming education. As we all know, we only could make 5 recommendations, and the interim committee can only bring so many forward. And so at the end, there were a lot of interest in a lot of bills. So this bill, House Bill 25-1078, it was merged into two bills and 2 ideas into one bill. And so this is not, it is still kind of the same priority that was approved, but now we have the forestry and firefighter piece on top of that came from the Fire Commission. And I believe, I'm looking for the exact, it was basically the same education piece. There was a hefty price tag with this bill, and I know the bill sponsors and CSU have been working to see what they could do to at least stand this up. I talked to the bill sponsors and some folks last week as a commissioner. We were all down as commissioners down at the state capitol, and they're at least trying to see if they can put a shell into, get approved and get a shell of this program put into and get that passed, and then look for appropriations in years to come to kind of get this program started. I know there's very popular and a lot of support, but I think today we wanted to ask you all, and I hope that you read it and looked at this. I also have James and Vaughn if they want to jump in, but as a legislative committee, we wanted, since it is different than the priorities that we had voted on to support, we were wanting to ask you all if we could, as a full council, if we could take a recommended stance of support in this bill so that some of us can go down and testify in support, and also folks can see that the Forest Health Council is behind this full bill. So with that, any questions on House Bill 25-1078? And I know if Vaughn and James want to comment on this one right now, and then we'll go into Senate Bill 7. And I would like to move, Mr. Chair, if that would be okay, that we do take a support stance from the Colorado Forest Health Council for House Bill 25-1078.
Okay, there's a motion for support, and now let's move to discussion and additional facts. So let's move maybe to James first, and we'll see if Vaughn has any comments as well, and anyone else.
Thank you. Thanks, Director. I think the commissioner did a great job laying out that. I think some of the conversations that I've been a part of at CSU, I think CSU, their stance has been pretty we think this is a good idea. All of this is subject to available appropriations. So this is something that they're very much so, I think, in support of in concept. And so there's going to be no pushback, at least from the university system. But I do think that the commissioner did a great job about laying out where we are in this process and how the different paths might start to unfold.
James, off the top of your head, do you know what the fiscal note, what the financial impacts look like?
I do. So the total bill right now is 1.2 million. Most of that is coming from the CSU, the higher education side, which is about 700,000. And the remaining is coming from DPS, public safety, for the DFPC and the firefighter portion.
Okay. Vaughn, do you want to add anything? I can't hear you. Maybe try one more time. Let me just kind of open it up to see what kind of questions folks may have. Vaughn, just let us know when you can jump in, and we'll move to Amy.
Dan, did I miss, have the departments taken a position on this bill? Sounds like James, you can.
Yeah, James, you want to speak to that?
Yes, thanks, Director. The Department of Natural Resources has been approved to have a support position of this.
Thanks, James. And part of the question I have for just to open it up for discussion is I think the merits of this bill are great. We are in a really tough budget year. And so any bill with a fiscal note, I think everybody knows, is going to be highly scrutinized. And I guess looking for some feedback on, as the Joint Budget Committee has some really difficult decisions up ahead that can impact a lot of different programs related to our organizations or representation. How do we wade into, how do we balance the fiscal impacts across the state with our recommended support?
Yeah, I'll jump in first, and others can maybe jump in as well. I think, Amy, that's a great question. We actually, the next bill that we're going to be discussing, the DNR right now, we are technically, neutral, and I believe the Division of Fire Prevention Control is as well, kind of based on some of the fiscal impacts. So the legislative body has really challenging work before them this year. And actually, as many of you know, I used to be a legislator, and for the first time, for my knowledge, I actually have a meeting coming up soon where the DNR has very little general fund, just so you know. We have as little as, it's really some of the wolf funding, and then we have a little bit for Parks and Wildlife, and then, as you know, Amy, Division of Water Resources, but it's tiny, compared to other departments. But we're sitting down with JBC members and OSPB. It's either next week or the following week to discuss like where we could cut from, and this is the first time, to my knowledge, cabinet members have been a part of these discussions after a budget has actually been submitted. So you're absolutely right. They have to try to figure out how to cut about $1 billion from the budget. And I think the fiscal analysis is really important to look at. But I'm not a legislator right now. We don't have any legislators here, and that's really a key part of their job, is to weigh out the priorities. Is this more important than this or that? And my guess, knowing the landscape, the bills that have significant fiscal notes, like, $1 million or even less, they're going to have a really hard time getting through this year. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I might also just to note that there has been talk, because since these bills were merged, is to separate them. and maybe possibly do that, but I don't know where that is at, but that was talk about that too. And I know CSU and the 4-H and Extension have been looking at alternative modes of funding. So and they think that they're really kind of been working very hard at that. So I think even though it sounds like a large price tag, they're looking at other opportunities, and at least they're hoping at least get this approved and then look at funding in years going forward, because it was the price tag was for multiple years. It was for like 3 years. So also that's a note that it's not just for 1 year, it was for multiple years. So they're looking at what they can piece together. So I just wanted to make that as note as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Are there other questions? I think I see some questions here. It looks like Matt is up.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Dan. So, I think from my perspective, what's been really good about the Forest Health Council's focus in really the last 3 sessions has been a continued drumbeat around workforce development and raising awareness about the opportunities for folks entering the workforce or in the workforce looking for other alternative means of employment, that there's a deep need in the conservation space for actors to come in and take on some of these roles. So I think it's valuable to continue to send these signals, but I think it's really healthy for us to also acknowledge that everything that we advance as a body is not always going to be translated into statute and or translated into statute and be funded, and perhaps that's okay. And going back sort of the well and refining sort of our ambitions is a really healthy routine as this organization continues to get better and better at kind of putting to pen and paper what it is that we'd like to see. And I've been really trying to drive internally at the agency a kind of like to what end mindset, an outcome-based mindset. And I think we're getting better every year with these successive bills. And I love that we nexused with extension in this ambition, because you've already got this like intact capacity that really has a really firm and durable reach into schools and into rural communities in particular to kind of bring people these concepts and these ideas. So I just wanted to, it was more of a statement that like, I think we're on the right track, because workforce deficits are just critical to our ability in with hearing Andrea's on, like or Andrea's on, is it Andrea or Andrew? You'll have to correct me. We'll have to, we're doing some really cool thinking with Troy, her boss, and the U.S. Forest Service about how do we really reinvigorate this idea of moving to scale. And that's going to all be dependent on a workforce surging in a way that allows us to actually activate at scale. And so I think we're on the right trail, hunting kind of the right animal here. But I think it's really important that folks kind of ready themselves to not necessarily be disappointed, but potentially get ready to go back to the well and continue to refine these policies. I just think it's a good, healthy evolution, and it really speaks to the work that the legislative committee is doing and the support that they're getting from staff and just getting more and more voices and fine tuning. So there's more just a general statement. I think we're on the right track, and I look forward to supporting the bill in concept, acknowledging that the price tag and the challenges that the JBC is facing this year maybe suggest that the likelihood of it being funded this year is pretty low, and that might be okay. So just some thoughts for the group, and I'd love any response to that.
Okay, let's move to Clyde, and then we have Mark.
So following on to that, a lot of ideas are proposed in one legislative session, don't get funded or get changed or modified and move on to the next year. So is this one of these where we could have a presence by taking a support position on this? And even though it may not get funded, we hope it does. But the reality is this is going to be a tough year for new asks. So what's the attitude in the legislature? I'm way down here in La Plata County, so I don't get to Denver very often.
Well, Commissioner, every bill gets a fair hearing, as you know, and it's an opportunity for, whether it's forest health or education or transportation or whatever the topic is, for folks to advocate on why these are important to fund and why they should be a priority to fund. So it's up to the legislators to decide, you know, how that fits within the budget that they have to balance. But yeah, it could be a great opportunity to share why this is important. Mark is up next.
Yes, I feel that the intent of this bill is very important, and I think it's a great course. I've had a lot of experience over the years in working with 4-H programs. I feel that the price tag is excessive, and I think it's going to face a lot of headwinds because of that. But I think there's still a lot of opportunity there, and we can deliver a lot. When you look at other programs similar to that, they're pretty effective without quite this big a price tag. And I think some of the time maybe we need to reprioritize things within, say, the 4-H program or the outreach that way to I think there may need to be some internal choices there as to what we want to support, but I very much want to support the educational workforce development part of it and through that venue. And personally, I was stunned by the price tag, but I think there's some room in between there. And I think it's important that we make an approach or support this year to maybe get success in outgoing years. And so I think taking that stance right now is pretty important. And so, and I think that I think there's things could be done for less money and still get the intent done. And then I had one other question on this same thing. Director McCombs, as I understand it, you guys are working on a educational center with the State Forest Service and CSU over on the State Forest. And is everybody aware of that?
Dan, would you like me to respond to that?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So Mark, thanks for highlighting, and I'll maybe I can put a picture in the chat. We did receive a donation through our development team at Warner for the to sort of incentivize or put some energy behind developing an offsite a training center at the State Forest on some land adjacent, and we're working with a handful of folks to sort of continue that funding the development program to get the rest of the resources. And it really, the concept, it's the Michigan River Camp is what it's called, and it's adjacent to the U.S. Forest Service and State Forest and CPW land and managed landscapes, and it just has the opportunity to be a really unique place where we can take students, foresters, and it can be available to anyone certainly outside of the State Forest Service to do sort of a in situ or in the backcountry environment for training and development. And the idea is to have a training center. We've got a house already there that we're going to theoretically remodel for like a shower house and shared kitchen, and then the training center. And then we're working with CPW to think through how we might model the yurts that they have there up at the State Forest State Park, and have like a really cool offsite facility that could benefit in-forest training and development for both CSFS employees and of course anybody else that would be interested in using that facility. So I'll see if I can throw the rendering in the chat, but that is going to be 100% donor funded, and we're looking for additional resources to endow the long-term maintenance of that facility as well. And we'll sort of run it like an enterprise, so that if other entities would use it, there'd be nominal fees to help offset some of the maintenance costs. But pretty cool project. And we're really thankful to the donor for bringing those resources to bear to put this interesting concept in play.
I think that is an excellent opportunity and location, and I like that's what I'm trying to get at, is it's 100% donor supported, and I really think that hands-on, on-site, actual educational opportunity would be huge. And this is the kind of thing that I think we're looking for in these essentially low budget years, and I applaud your guys' efforts in that. And what I guess I'm saying is, if there any way as a group that we could support that, or get a vote of confidence or whatever we could do, I would suggest that is an opportunity.
I'll tell you what, just to close this one out, Dan, we can brief folks. We can send a little brief out that we can to Courtney to get folks up to speed on what this concept is. And if it's something the council would like to be supportive of, we'd absolutely encourage and enjoy that. And we're working with CPW right now to think through what a potential GOCO application grant might look like, or some other funds. So yeah, it's a really cool thing, and it kind of came out of nowhere. So really excited about it.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Matt. And good question and comments, Mark. Other
Mr. Chair,
questions?
I just wanted to go back
Yeah.
and I just checked some of my notes. I do think when I talked to the CSU extension, they're also looking for other opportunities to backfill some of the funding gaps. But I believe the last time I talked to them, the price tag for the CSU portion extension and the workforce internships and stuff was actually, they got it under $1 million. And again, just to let everyone know, this is not a 1-year price tag. It was for, I think, 3 years to do this program. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knows it's not a one-time thing. That's why they're looking to at least get it kind of approved, and then, look at getting it started the first year, and then look at years going forward of how they're going to fund it, whether it's through the legislature or other modes. So just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. I believe Mike Morgan will also speak on this bill too. Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dan. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to add a couple comments to it. Of course, I think everybody on this call knows, and has been mentioned, is, finances are a little tight this year. I would liken it to, we're kind of shaking the couch cushions to keep funding going and keeping existing programs going. So any of these new programs are obviously, as Mr. Morgan said, is it, it's going to face a headwind. We are neutral on this bill, for those reasons, as you mentioned, Director Gibbs. We're kind of in that position of prioritization of what's really important to us. I just wanted to add, that we all understand that the workforce issues that the forestry folks face, as well as the firefighting workforce, we're about in crisis mode with a lot of that in a lot of this country. And so we're committed to doing the things. And as Commissioner McNally mentioned, this is it loosely represents a recommendation of the Fire Commission to get some of the framework in there that we are hopeful will give us opportunities in the future for funding to continue to work towards that. But I guess I always wanted to make sure everybody on here knows that if you don't see us in the room actively advocating for some new programs, often it's because of just the fiscal impacts and the realities of what we can do new, given the constraints of the budget. So just wanted to add those comments. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much. I appreciate that. Other comments or questions? And I know Jody has a motion on the table as well. Any questions? Yeah, Clyde.
Chairman, are you in a position to accept a second on this support?
Yeah, we had a second initially, I thought. I can't remember who. But are you making a second? Or a
Second.
third? Okay. Any further comments regarding this? And before we move to a vote, just kind of look through here. Any thumbs up or thumbs down or comments in the chat? No. So the motion on the table is to support HB 1078. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any in opposition say no or nay. And I know there's some kind of abstaining as well, which is okay as well. So the majority has it, so that we will move to support that particular bill. Next up is a bill to increase prescribed fire burns. It's Senate Bill 7. And I believe what Jody and maybe James, a few
Yeah,
will talk about that.
yeah, I'll start. As the council knows, there's a subcommittee that some of us from the Forest Health Council and the Fire Commission have been sitting in. The Prescribed Fire Subcommittee has been meeting. And so this was the reason that we brought this forward with a recommended stance. We discussed this bill of a support or not support in the legislative committee. It was a very robust and in-depth conversation. I don't think there was anyone who was I think we had just more questions and more wanted to have more of an in-depth conversation with the full council and bring you all in and try to have a full council discussion on the pros and cons of this and the price tag. And I know certainly the being on the prescribed fire subcommittee with the Fire Commission, we certainly, well, this was one of the top recommendations. So I'm going to turn this over to Vaughn and James, who can kind of go more in depth, but I wanted to really make sure everyone understood that the legislative committee decided to not, which is very, usually we're really unanimous in our stances, but this one, we really wanted to bring this to the full council to have a in-depth conversation and for you to hear the same information. And so I'm going to turn it over to James and Vaughn. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I'll probably defer to Vaughn at this point. The State Forest Service we're watching this bill, but it's dealing more so with prescribed fire, and so letting DFPC kind of take that lead. So.
And Mr. Chair, also, I think Rob Addington from the Nature Conservancy also wanted to speak on behalf of this bill, if he might be able to be recognized to add some background. I know they are very much in support of this bill, if that would be possible, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Great.
And I can jump in first, Director Gibbs. Vaughn, of course, if you saw in the chat, he's at an RMCG meeting, so he'll be back on here shortly. But long story short of this bill, we've worked with the advocates for it and the sponsors, and we're comfortable with it. But again, will be kind of a neutral position for us because of the fiscal notes of that. But the high level of the bill is that it provides $1 million insurance backstop, is what it's being referred to, that if in the event of a prescribed fire, that no more than 10% of what's remaining in the fund could be used to offset the costs of an escaped prescribed fire. So starting with $1 million, the first one would be, $100,000 limit. The second one would be 90,000, et cetera, et cetera. So the amount kind of goes down. But again, we kind of work through with the sponsors. We think it's movement in the right direction to get more of this work on the landscape. So we have no concerns with the bill at all. The other piece of the bill is about the certified burner programs and providing some reciprocity. It does continue to give, the rulemaking authorities associated with that. So we would continue to go through that with all of our stakeholders on the reciprocity processes of recognizing certifications from other jurisdictions that come into the state of Colorado. So high level, that's really kind of what it does. As Commissioner McNally mentioned, the Fire Commission and members of the Forest Health have been working on the prescribed fire strategic plans. All this bill was, as a part of their work. And so that group has gone through that. They're supportive with it. So I think we're in a pretty good spot there, pending finding the money to fund it. So I'll pause there. Looks like Paige, you had something you wanted to add?
Paige is up next.
Yeah, as Commissioner Shattuck McNally mentioned, the Nature Conservancy has been working with a coalition of other folks in support of this legislation. And so if you are okay with it, Director Gibbs, I'd like to invite my colleague Rob Addington, and also there's Another person that has been another colleague of ours that's been working on this from Western Resource Advocates, Brendan Witt, if either of them would like to add just more information or be available to answer questions.
Sure. Rob or Brandon, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, sure. I'll start us off. Thank you, Director Gibbs, and thank you, Director Morgan, for the context there. As Paige mentioned, the Nature Conservancy, and I'm Rob Addington, by the way, with our Forest and Fire program. We are in support of this bill, recognizing it as an important tool for overcoming some barriers related to prescribed fire, especially around liability and insurance challenges that burners face. And so the prescribed fire claims fund portion of the bill is really targeted toward helping us overcome some of these barriers around liability and advancing the use of prescribed fire. The reciprocity component of the bill, I think sections 2 and 3 are targeted around some of the workforce pieces and capacity pieces as well, as Director Morgan described. And so just at that high level, we just see it as a really important tool for advancing the use of fire. We know fire itself as it relates to fuels management and wildfire risk mitigation is just a really important tool for us, and are working to advance its use at scale. The fund itself is modeled after similar funds in other Western states, California in particular, and one that is being set up currently in Oregon as well. And as Paige mentioned, in terms of details, we did invite Brendan Witt, who is with Western Resource Advocates, who's been really in the weeds on this bill, working on that, and is available for questions if there are some in terms of details. Brendan, do you want to quickly just introduce yourself as well, if you don't mind? Director Gibbs, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Rob, Paige, for inviting me. And as Director Morgan mentioned, the DFPC has been working with the sponsors and advocates. We have been the advocates for this bill, some of the advocates for this bill in that group. But and at WRA, I've worked with many of you on the Prescribed Fire Subcommittee. This is a bill that we've discussed frequently, a concept that we've discussed frequently coming out of California that has been seen to support the increase of safe prescribed burning in California. And again, the program has been replicated in Oregon with their claims fund being stood up. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the technical functions of this bill, but I would just add 2 quick notes, which is that in California, this has been successful in enticing private insurers back into the market. There's at least one private insurer who's created new prescribed fire liability insurance packages directly tied to California's prescribed fire liability pilot program. And the reciprocity concept has also caught the eye of some of our colleagues at the Prescribed Fire Council in Montana, who are also seeking reciprocity, looking to exchange the experience between similar states in the West. A concept that's very popular in the Southeast, where I think about 12 states share reciprocity for prescribed fire certifications in the Southeast. But happy to answer any questions. And thank you, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, for introducing the bill and for all the work that you've done on the subcommittee with this.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Church.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about coverage. What type of people would this cover? State employees or certified folks? I know some of the HOAs around the state do their own burns and burn pile burns. Also, to add on to that question, we had about 3 years ago, we had a group of international controlled burn experts here from Italy and Australia. We had about 15 people. We had them for 3 days. Would it cover them if they were going to do a demonstration controlled burn alongside of U.S. Forest Service or Colorado State Forest Service?
Brendan, you want to answer that? And then I know it looks like Mark Morgan has a question follow up too.
Absolutely. I'll answer that quickly. The bill as it's set up right now requires some eligibility criteria for a prescribed fire to be covered under the pilot claims program. The burn would have to be managed and attended by a certified prescribed burn manager, which in the bill is defined as Colorado Certified Burner A or B certifications, or NWCG qualified burn boss status. And in addition, the prescription plan for that burn would have to be reviewed and approved by DFPC. And a nominal fee of $100 or more, as the division would determine based on the complexity of the particular burn, would be required. And then at that point, if those three criteria are met, a burn would be eligible for damage coverage under the pilot program, as Director Morgan mentioned, up to 10% of the funds available in the fund. So if an HOA had Colorado certified burner A or B burners managing their burns, or an NWCG qualified burn boss, and they follow those steps, they could be certified. If an international group met those qualifications as well, or had the burn managed and led by a Colorado certified burner or an NWCG qualified burn boss, and they followed those steps, then they would be eligible, if that answers your question. And Director Morgan, I don't know if you have anything else there.
Great, thanks for that
No,
follow-up.
I think you
Yeah.
covered it well.
Anything to add, Mike?
No, I think Brandon covered it well. Just coming, our focus with the prescribed firework are specifically on, the focus is on state and private property. We recognize it, and I say that just because, we're not going to try to tell Region 2 what they should be doing with their programs. We're just trying to be a good partner with all of this to get more of the prescribed firework done. And provide pathways forward to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Mark Morgan.
Just have a question there. Have there been any claims on the fund in California and Oregon yet? Have they had any claims on it, and how did that go? And then secondly, in this time of pretty tight budget constraints, is there any opportunity for non-public funding for this initial startup fund that you're looking to create? Is there any money available through any of the other foundations or whatever that they feel this would be viable? If this seems to me like we want to have the ability to do controlled burns on state and private property in the state, and we want to develop that, and if funding is short, is there any donor opportunities, number one, and number two, are there any claims that we can learn from on the California system or the Oregon system?
Who can help answer that? Okay, Brendan.
Happy to answer. Paige and Rob, if I miss anything, or Director Morgan, if I miss anything, please jump in. But there have not been any claims to date in the California system, and Oregon's program was only set up at the end of last year, and I think it is just now accepting initial plans, and so they haven't had the time necessarily to have completed projects. California's program has been in place for 2 years now, and has not seen a claim yet, though it's covered around 200 burns a year through the project. So based on the generally accepted statistics on the safety and certification of professionally managed prescribed burns, that kind of follows with what they expected in their program as well.
Thank you for that, because that gives us an idea that there's a track record that exists out there. And you're saying it was about 200 burns a year for 2 years. So thank you.
Okay, Paige is up next.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on a couple of things. One that Director Morgan shared. I think what we've seen in discussions about prescribed fire is there's a particular need to increase non-governmental burn capacity. And so like in order to enable increased prescribed fire overall. And so I think this is really aimed at enabling more prescribed fire to happen in practitioners that are not associated with governmental entities, because they tend to have some of their own protections. So I think, this is really strategically aimed at that. And then I will also say, just to the comment about the funding, I mean, this may be a case similar to the bill that we just discussed previously, where we need to look at establishing a program, getting it in place, and then, getting the funding in place in a subsequent year. So I'm hopeful that at a minimum, we might be able to establish the program, and that even if it's not associated with the desired funding this year, and continue to look for funding in the future.
Thanks, Paige. Next question or comment is from Amy.
Yeah, thanks, Director Gibbs. I may have missed this, but was this a unanimous recommendation coming out of the prescribed fire committee, subcommittee? Sounds like yes.
Brendan, you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll clarify. I was nodding my head. It was a unanimous bill recommended by the Wildfire Matters Review Committee, Interim Committee. The subcommittee, Director Morgan, I don't think has actually voted on this recommendation, but as a part of the statewide prescribed fire strategy, which the subcommittee has been set up, this is one of the recommendations that's been included in that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, Brendan. This was kind of a chicken and egg thing, I guess I would call it. That the work was done by there was a group already working on this as the prescribed fire subcommittee was being stood up. So while it was outside of the prescribed fire subcommittee per se, the prescribed fire subcommittee of the Fire Commission has reviewed it and feels like it's in line with with what we're trying to accomplish. So we have no concerns. The commission has no concerns about the bill. Again, it just kind of boils down to the funding. And I think to Paige's point, that it's a lot of this right now. And Mr. Morgan, you mentioned that, and Commissioner Church, you did too. Sometimes it's about making sure we get the framework in place for good programs, and then find resources they come available to build them into better programs. So I think that's kind of where we're at on this one.
Okay. Any further comments on this? And I don't think I've spoken on this yet, but similar to Director Morgan, the DNR is actually neutral on this in part, looking at the financial, the fiscal note. Not that we're opposed to it or anything. It's just a landscape at the Capitol, so we just have to be neutral on it right now. Andrea?
Just put a comment here, and I just want to, for the record, that my abstention is due to the constraints that we're currently dealing with from providing formal positions on any of these bills. But I just want to emphasize that the issues that are being presented are incredibly important to wildfire risk reduction across jurisdictions, and sincerely appreciate the information that folks are providing on the legislative efforts to address them.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. Appreciate that. Paige.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, and fine if you're not able to answer this, but I wonder if EFPC and DNR would be able to support if the fiscal notes are removed or changed. If there's no fiscal note and it's just establishing the program. And maybe you can't answer, but I just wonder if that makes a difference.
Mike, you want to go first, or you want me to? You want to go?
That's an interesting question, Paige. And I'll have to do a little bit of homework on that. I would assume without a fiscal note, we would have a little more latitude to do that. I also think, to Matt Morgan's comments, the gifts, grants, and donations, I'm not sure that we added that language in there, and that may be something worth adding. And if we were to, and I'm thinking out loud, hopefully I'm not saying more than I'm supposed to, but I'm thinking out loud here a little bit to say, if the fiscal note was removed and there was gifts, grants, and donations language added, then we might be in a better position to be able to say, yeah, we're in support of this. So that's my take on it, Dan. I don't know if you have a different feel than that.
Yeah, I would agree. And just so everyone knows, like, it's not always like what Director Morgan or I think of the bills to it goes to the highest levels of state government, where the governor also reviews it to make sure it's in line with his vision as well of what we need to do and so forth. So, but bringing down the fiscal note would definitely be a huge help for sure. Brendan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Director Morgan. I just want to clarify, the bill currently does include the gifts, grants, and donations, the ability to receive gifts, grants, and donations language. And like you mentioned earlier, similar to the previous bill that was discussed, advocates and the sponsors I know have been checking under every couch cushion and every pocket of the laundry trying to find anything for the bill, and the option to create the program without funding in hopes of better funding years to come is certainly on the table.
Yeah. Matt? No, okay, I just saw it. Oh, I'm sorry, it was my cursor thing with a hand. Any other questions or comments regarding this particular bill?
So, Mr. Chair, I would like to make the motion for the Forest Health Council to support Senate Bill 7.
Okay, that motion's been made. Is there a second by Clyde possibly?
Yes, second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this? Mark?
Yeah, I want to just be clear here. We're supporting the bill as it's written right now with the fiscal part or just for the donations and private sourcing? Or are we supporting the bill with the essentially the price tag contribution from the state?
I think it would be similar to the previous bill that we passed, which also has a large fiscal note, but we acknowledge that might need to be adjusted before the final. I mean, that's my take.
I was just trying to get where you're trying to go here and move it along and get the support for it.
Yeah,
First, but it end up anyway.
Yeah, I think the motion on the table is to support it as is. I'm confident the legislators know what they probably need to do to get the bill through. And if that means amending it to include just gift grants and donations, I'm sure they know that, but I'm sure it's something that, I'm looking at you, Paige, I think Nature Conservancy, I know you've been really involved with this bill, but that's something for you all to probably figure out in the future, but we're not going to figure that out right now because, the bill sponsors aren't part of this meeting either right now. So the motion on the table is really, supporting the bill as is without any amendments. Any follow-up questions or comments before we vote? Again, I'm gonna stay neutral on this, so I won't be formally voting by just registering, I guess, my neutral position. But all those in favor signify as aye or yes.
Aye.
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 Okay. Any in opposition, say nay or no. And I know there's quite a few abstain, but it's clearly there's a motion to support this. So we'll support this, as written, as drafted, excuse me. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jody, and the committee for all your work on that. And before we move away from you, we also want to discuss, believe it or not, the next year's legislative session. We're going to blink and it's going to be 2026, unfortunately. And I know the committee's been working really hard on concepts as we plan for next year. And so let's, walk through what we have, for right now for possible concepts. And Commissioner Shattuck McNally, you want to take the lead on walking through that?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Director. I appreciate everyone. This is really important conversations, and certainly we all understand and hear about the legislative constraints for budget funding and things. And so I just want to kind of start that conversation with that that grounding that we understand. We don't know what the forecast will look for 2026. As you all know, the legislative committee really backed up our calendar for deliberations, so we could get these recommendations in front of budgets and directors and things going forward. So wanted to all kind of let you know that we took this into heavy consideration as we had these discussions. All of our meetings are recorded. We had some amazing presentations the last few months, and I really hope you might go and listen to some of these folks who presented. We had folks from almost every corner. I don't think we had 3 of the 4 corners. I don't think we had anyone from the southeast corner of the state come present on anything, but some really remarkable programs and thoughts and processes. And I want to just thank all of our former presenters and all the folks who attend. And I always want to thank the committee. They attend, we have full attendance almost all the time, great conversations, great debate. And I just want to thank them all for their service, because we still meet every Friday. So we're pretty active. So here are, I think you will see these in the packet, our legislative recommendations for 2026. And again, we'll kind of talk through these. I hope that you read these. But the first recommendation is maintain funding for healthy forests, vibrant communities, forest restoration, wildfire risk mitigation grant programs, and the Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program. And the forest, this is the language, and I'll just read through it just so in case you don't have it in front of you. The Colorado Forest Health Council recommends the General Assembly maintain the current annual appropriations for the vitally important forest health and wildfire mitigation programs, improving the health of Colorado forests, including the Healthy Forest Vibrant Communities Program, the Forest Restoration and Wildfire Risk Mitigation Program, and the Colorado Strategic Action Program. And I won't go in through all of those, but I think we can go ahead and read all of that. And these programs are really all complementary to each other and unique, and they each support forest health through differing implementation and funding strategies. The demand for forest health and wildfire mitigation far exceeds current investments in 2024 in the 2024 FirWarm and COSWAP. Really, if you look back, we're only able to fund 34% of the total demand for forest health funding, and the state cannot afford to divest from this effort. And so we thought we'd just walk through these one by one and have discussion on each of these, and have the Forest Health Council approve the recommendations one at a time. We had a lot of discussion, and this will kind of inform the recommendation at the end of this presentation, that we really need to keep the funding, and there's a cost of doing nothing and reducing any of these programs. As you can see, with only 34% of the funding to meet the demand, it is obviously the scale and scope and need is still urgent and great and throughout the whole state. So we wanted to make a strong statement with that and try to stand for what we need to keep going, and the cost of doing nothing or reducing these is too great from the committee's perspective. So any questions with that first recommendation? I want to thank Courtney and Allison and staff for helping us word and craft those. It was really very vital and important.
Any
If there
questions
are-
regarding this first one?
Yeah. Kate, I think it's Amy Moyer first, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Amy.
Yeah, thanks, Director Gibbs. I just have a quick question on the COSWAP program. Does it still have the defined boundaries of where that program can fund projects?
Yeah, and Alice can walk through, but we have our both workforce development component of the grant, and then we have our landscape workforce. You can apply from anywhere in the state. Landscape are the RMRI regions, plus the 7 Front Range counties. And it has to be through a lens of protecting life, property, and critical infrastructure. Allison, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I just want to add that there's some flexibility in our statute. And so we've had two special releases under COSWAP. One was from $2 million of ARPA funding that we had that was awarded to us through the lens of watershed protection. And so we had a special release where COSWAP and CWCB's Wildfire Ready Watersheds program started collaborating and identifying priority strategic areas to invest similar $1 million grants that still within high priority watersheds that protect life, property, and critical infrastructure as well. And we'll be releasing another announcement in the next month of a special release that we just made. But in general, yes, Amy, we stick within our strategic focus areas. However, we have flexibility and have worked within a watershed lens as well.
Thanks, Allison. Let's see, Katie, what's up next?
This is less of a question, but I just wanted to share that we have done listening sessions with the Colorado Forest Collaboratives Network 2 years in a row, and both years this was their #1 recommendation. So that is the kind of community-based forestry groups across the state. So I just wanted to share that in some support of this.
Great. Thanks, Katie. Appreciate that.
So, Mr. Chair, if there is no other further questions, I would like to make a motion to approve recommendation #1 for the 2026 legislative priorities.
Okay, there's been a motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Julie Stencil is seconding. Any further discussion or clarification or anything on this #1 recommendation? I'm just kind of flipping through here to see. I don't think I see any. So let's move. Okay, all those signify as aye if you support this recommendation 1.
Aye.
All those in favor
Aye.
say aye.
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 Any opposition say nay or no. Okay, the ayes carry it.
Thank you all.
you.
Thank you.
You want to move to #2 now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So recommendation #2 is about Good Neighbor Authority. And as I'll just kind of read through this just to kind of ground everyone. As you know, the Good Neighbor Authority, or GNA, allows the state to complete important forest health projects on federal lands, increasing the scale of work and allowing cross-boundary planning and implementation. It is an important, critically important tool for shared stewardship. And that's kind of the theme that we had throughout our legislative committee for the year, was shared stewardship and collaboration. The Forest Health Council, this is the writing that we would send forward, was the Colorado Forest Health Council recommends increasing or expanding state funding for GNA programs. And this is based on the Washington, Oregon, and Montana programs. And the justification is that states where the GNA is working have seen the significant state investments in their GNA programs, including annual appropriations. And this has allowed them to act as partners in shared stewardship in a very tangible way. And these are some of the comparisons that we discussed at length and had some robust conversation around these areas. If you look at the map or the numbers provided, Colorado being at only $6 million per year, and looking at Oregon and Washington at $20 and $29 million a year, this is important work and investment. And we know there's going to be fiscal constraints, but the Good Neighbor Authority is such a powerful a process and tool for shared stewardship and leveraging resources and partnerships that we figure we have to ask, and we have to keep this in front of our legislators and our state government to make sure they understand how important this tool is. And so that is the first part of recommendation #2. The second part of this recommendation is that it was identified that we could ask to modify language in the Colorado Revised Statute to reflect recent national changes in GNA policy, including the expansion of GNA to National Park Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, an expansion of the authority to authorize recreation services. This could allow spending state dollars on National Park Service and U.S. Forest, USFS lands, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service lands services in line with the WIG of balancing conservation and outdoor recreation through the Good Neighbor Authority. And I don't know if we want to spell out the acronym for WIG. If someone could help me, is that the
Widely important goal.
yeah, widely important goals. Sorry, still I need to get some more Advil. And so that is the recommendation, and so I'm hoping this will also be despite the fiscal note, we can always hear no, but this is a vitally important, we believe, shared stewardship process. So with that, I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve recommendation number 2 with both 1 and 2 under that recommendation, Mr. Chair, and toss it back to you for further discussion or questions.
Yeah, thanks so much for going over this recommendation number 2. Any questions or comments? I guess I didn't realize maybe Matt, you can McCombs can help. I didn't know there was a prohibition on Good Neighbor Authority funds, that it couldn't be used for National Park Service or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service lands. So has it strictly been BLM and U.S. Forest Service historically?
I mean, off the top of my, I'm not familiar. I don't know if it's prohibited. I just don't know if it's named.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean? So that, like, as the GNA policy is updated, it's expanded beyond just forest management activities to include other activities where states can partner under an agreement with the sponsoring federal entity, and execute work under shared stewardship. So it may be just adding. Again, I don't know if there's a prohibition. I'd have to go and get into the CRS a little bit.
Okay.
That is my understanding of it as well.
Okay, that is just silent.
Exactly. And just naming that, like, the state of Colorado essentially would be a signal to that state of Colorado is open for business as it relates to being good partners beyond the existing arrangements that we have with BLM and the Forest Service, that we're here for our friends in the Park Service and Fish and Wildlife as well.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
And if we did change it, as GNA expands beyond those entities, which there's likelihood that it will touch other agencies potentially over time, like Bureau of Rec, I think there's some conversations and others. It could be that if we were to pursue a statutory change, it could be all federal entities that are authorized to execute GNA agreements with states.
Yeah.
Consider there.
Interesting, because I think many of you are familiar with our Keep Colorado Wild Pass, and we were, last year brought in $40 million, and we explicitly have allowed the flexibility for some of those revenues to partner with federal partners blanket wide, BLM, U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Rec, as we explore partnerships with parks and managing outdoor recreation and so forth. So, but it's not explicit for Good Neighbor. Okay. James is up next, and I think I saw maybe another hand up. Let me see. Oh, Mark Morgan too has a hand up. So let's do James and then Mark.
Thanks, Director. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. So there is language in Colorado Revised Statute. It's not prohibiting any kind of thing. The idea on this one is just to make sure that if there is change, there is changes at that federal level with the passage of the Explore Act, to make sure that we're in line with those allowable uses too. Because right now it just says good authority means the authority of the state of Colorado pursuant to this section, to follow these policies. And so we just want to make sure, if we're looking into that we're including all allowable uses and all allowable landscapes. So no prohibition.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, James. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Here's a question from Brett online. Is the status a Good Neighbor with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Tribes? Who can help answer that? And then we'll move to Mark Morgan.
That was my.
Oh, that was your question? Okay, okay, great.
That was, I believe, I'm not sure on this, but I'm pretty sure, I'm working off memory here, that there have been GNA agreements with the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the past and reservations and tribes. So I don't know where you would research that, but I think in a lot of the other Western states, there's been significant programs done on BIA ground. So I think as long as there's no prohibition for any of these, it's an open door, then that gets where we need to go.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's something that we can make sure that language would be included in the future. Matt, do you know if any of your teams have worked on Southern Ute or Ute Mountain Ute lands?
Yeah, we're actively acting as stewards on a couple of their private properties in Gunnison County and down in the Southwest, but is explicitly on reservation lands or held lands. We've not, I don't believe we have it, but we're actively engaging, but it's not under the GNA agreement. It's under a service agreement that we have with the tribe.
Okay.
And if I'm misspeaking, any of my staff that are on the call, feel free to correct.
Okay, and Andrea also wrote in there that the Forest Service can participate in
Yeah,
being
that came
able
out of the
to-
2018 Farm Bill, as I recall, and that authority has been reaffirmed.
And then just a question for number 2 here, where we have Colorado at 6 million. What was that this year, or what fiscal year were these numbers? What is that from?
I will let
All-time funding? It seems like that's way low for Colorado, isn't it? For all-time funding, or Christina?
Christina.
Yes, it is an annual. So it is a combination. We don't get a GNA appropriation. However, we've been able to use state funding programs to leverage for GNA essentially. So that is an annual amount.
Okay. And then do we know if the other states there, Montana, are those annual, or we'll have to just wordsmith the language here because we have all-time funding.
I can change my motion to include adding that as annual
Yeah,
funding.
Courtney just made that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? I'm just kind of flipping through here, seeing if I have any hands raised or anything. I don't think so. So there's a motion on the table to support number 2, and we have a second as well from Commissioner Church. Any further discussions on this before we vote? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye to support.
Aye.
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 Any in opposition, say no or nay. Okay, the ayes carry it. Jody, you're on a roll, so you want to go to number 3?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so this was a topic that we've been wrestling with for a number of years now. And of note, when we talked about the, I think Katie brought up the bill that had made it all the way to about 2 days before the session and was dropped from appropriations, was this kind of what do we do and deal with the slash once the mitigation projects? We know that Larimer County just finished a very large $200,000 grant, DOLA grant biomass study that has actually a lot of recommendations with price tags, numbers, and recommendations that will soon be out there for everyone to look at. Also, the state, I believe the State Forest Service biomass study is a couple of months away from being shared with lots of actionable items. And so we wanted to put a place card holder in this item or this recommendation to at least recommend addressing biomass because it's an ongoing challenge and need and conversation. So this is kind of like a framework or an idea. We don't have a number or exact, but it's going to be developed before we meet in front of the a wildfire interim committee, but this is something that we can further define and bring more details to the council in April when we meet. But we wanted to, this is a recommendation. So biomass includes wood, slash, and other vegetation that is produced as a result of fuels reduction for forest health and wildfire mitigation work. And all fuels reduction projects produce biomass that is reduced in a number of ways, including burning, chipping, mulching, composting, etc. And so the biomass removal and utilization continues to be a challenging component for many forest health and wildfire mitigation projects, and in some case, cost prohibitive. And so the recommendation is for this challenge that we just want to take some look at maybe asking the state to help fund or pilot some of these programs that come out of these studies that would help with a bioprocessing network, or that portion in between of the transportation and moving that biomass from the area of the mitigation work to a useful end product or end use. And so that is kind of careful consideration, incorporating the lessons from these assessments and previous studies and past efforts to increase this biomass removal and supply chain infrastructure, and to decrease the cost of this, this continual challenge for many across our state. And so that is kind of a little bit not specific yet, but we're hoping to come back with a more specific, refined recommendation for number 3. But this is similar to kind of similar, but expanded from that popular bill that didn't get passed from 2023 or 2024. I'm losing track. Was it last year? I think it was. Yes. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would like to move that recommendation number 3 be approved as a 2026 legislative priority.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second too?
I would second.
Seconding. And before we open up for discussion, I apologize. I forgot for the other recommendations for 1 and 2. If any folks want to abstain as well, please just put in the chat that you were abstaining. So just so we can capture that. I'm just kind of going through any questions regarding this number 3, biomass. And again, as we mentioned earlier, these are concepts. These are not bills yet. I'm confident we'll be talking more about these too as they get fleshed out, and we look to see what kind of fiscal impact and so forth they could have. But these are high-level concepts. Okay, I don't see any thumbs up or anything, or thumbs down. So let's just move to vote on this. All those in favor to support number 3 signify as aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any in opposition, say no or nay. And then if you abstain, just let us know in the chat too, because I know there's probably folks that have to abstain based on their jobs and so forth, and just having more information. So the ayes carry it for right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last recommendation, number 4, we can go up to 5 recommendations, but we really were thinking about fiscal constraints potentially in the next 2026 legislative year. So this is just basically if, depending on the outcome and condition or funding for House Bill 25-10-1078, that we would just put a placeholder to, if it does not pass or it needs more fiscal funding, that we would keep this as a recommendation going forward. We'd like to see this fully implemented and going forward. So that's basically, we had done this last year with a different bill with I think the Community Navigator or those programs. We had make this recommendation for carry forward. So with that, I move that recommendation number 4 be approved as a legislative 2026 priority for the Colorado Forest Health Council.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
hi, Church, I could second that.
Okay, we have a motion, and then we have a second as well. So let's open up for any discussion that we may have for recommendation number 4. Any questions or clarification or comments regarding number 4? I apologize if I'm missing you, but I'm just trying to scroll through and see who I see has a hand up. I don't see any hands up. So let's move the motion on the table is to support number 4. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say no or nay. Okay, no opposition. And also please just put in the chat too if you're abstaining from all these or one or the other or so forth. I think that's it. Well, thanks so much for all your hard work on that. You have another?
I have one other suggestion from the committee, Mr. Chair. And this is a suggestion, so it's not really legislative, but it's something that we have, our legislative committee has been pretty excited about and feels really strongly. This is actually a recommendation for 2026. We're not sure that it's something we could do quickly and try to implement for this year, but we want to suggest for the Colorado Forest Health Council to have an education and awareness day at the Capitol and to the legislators. I just participated in a couple for county commissioners last week at the Capitol. The legislators come down and other folks and have breakfast. We can interact. And this would be an information sharing during probably the first 2 weeks of session before they get so busy in their work and going to committees. We really want to engage all of them. And the objective of this is to really educate and raise awareness of the council's work, since we directly report to the council and to the governor, and really impress upon the urgent need for forestry and wildfire mitigation work, and also highlight the successes in the state. And this goes back to our conversation, was kind of a theme as well, shared stewardship, but the cost of doing nothing. So here's some of the ideas that we had was Forest Health Council information, including kind of the annual report or QR codes for folks to download and have those. We're looking and talking about our vision, our 2055 vision for the forest health in Colorado that we can share with them and our progress, as that is one of our statutory duties and responsibilities. Also, with the return on investment statistics that we could share on the investments from all these programs that are funded and showing the work that has been done, and especially showcase and highlight successfully leveraged resources, including for water utilities, Colorado State Forest programs, and have maybe storyboards with photos of successful projects, wildfire impacts, things like that. For example, one thing that I know Director Gibbs is very well aware of is the successful mitigation project that was in Summit County that basically protected a neighborhood in Breckenridge from a wildfire. And so we can highlight those and show some of those stories, and also share some photos, because some of these legislators may not be able to get up into burn areas or mitigation projects. Also to share, educate on Good Neighbor Authority for policymakers, maybe a one-pager, and then also to share other challenges and opportunities and get a chance to interact and just to raise education and awareness. And this would we were looking to maybe look for sponsors. We know there is no funding or budget for this kind of activity to pay for breakfast or other items like storyboards, but we think we have folks that maybe would be willing to help sponsor the breakfast and or the food for the breakfast, and have this as an activity for the Forest Health Council the very beginning of 2026. And so with that, I'll just open it for questions, and would love to have this maybe something we could all work on together as a full Forest Health Council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate all this information. Any questions or comments? Just thinking of this Capitol Days at the Capitol. When I was a legislator, we always had the joint House and Senate Ag Committee were presented by the regional forester by the head of the DNR and by the state forester. So the three of them always, presented to this joint ag committee and talked about coordination and how we work together and collaborate and kind of priorities that we have. I always thought it was very well received for me. Like it was kind of a one-stop shop. I got to ask questions to figure out, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? So I would love to see this kind of a variation of this, a day at the Capitol or something like that. I think it'd be really beneficial. Allison?
Thanks, Dan. From our legislative committee meetings, Courtney and I were going to reach out to the Attorney General's office regarding any possible conflicts of interest with council members or anything like that. We did get a response, and the response is that yes, this is something the Forest Health Council can do, and I will share more information with the committee after I work through some of the points. However, it was noted that potentially and most likely she would recommend that DNR employees and possibly OEDIT not participate as to not violate restrictions as state employees.
Interesting.
So, Mr. Chair, we were anticipating that maybe that might be an issue. And that's why we had asked Courtney and Allison to reach out to make sure we knew the landscape and guardrails. So that this would be a lot of the Forest Health Council or Legislative Committee working on planning this and pulling this together. And because staff wouldn't really be able to support, unless I think we could probably ask for details or information, but they wouldn't actually be able to help us do that. So I just wanted to share that. But I think we have some volunteers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thanks. Paige.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we did something similar in previous iterations of the Forest Advisory Council, where it was generally the non-governmental or at least non-state and federal members of the council that represented the council in speaking to a legislature. And I thought it's been a while, but I do think it was generally coordinated in conjunction with the briefing that Director Gibbs mentioned, where there was a joint meeting of the sort of Ag and Natural Resources committees, and maybe there was a session that was the governmental report outs and then a session that included the Forest Health Advisory Group, and representatives were generally non-governmental members of the council.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it was pretty effective.
Yeah, I agree, Paige. It seems like yesterday, but it's probably like 20 years ago.
So, Mr. Chair, I think we just need to ask permission from the full Forest Health Council to proceed with this action, knowing the parameters, and we can bring back maybe a more detailed plan in April if we just need kind of the thumbs up or approval from the full Forest Health Council to move forward on this concept.
Great. Any other questions or anything regarding this kind of Capitol Day? Andrea?
Thank you, Director. I guess a question, because we're doing what is being laid out before me appears very similar to something that we're going to do in early March in Wyoming, but that's before the Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee, state of the forest health, and with some discussions around that, and as well as fire mitigation and management. But for my clarity on the Capitol's days, is the intent that committee members are merely laying out the parameters of what brings us together, the kind of issues that we discuss, successful partnerships, but staying away from taking positions on legislation. My only reservations would be around, for federal agencies at least, as far as the Forest Service is concerned, that our presence or participation is not construed as advocating or lobbying for positions that we've abstained from.
Good question and comment. Jody?
I think that we are looking to really be careful in that space and avoid that, and just mostly do this for education awareness, and maybe to share successes of past projects that were funded, and the past programs that were funded, and successful outcomes from those past programs that were funded, and not take any discussions on current bills or future legislation, but just to raise awareness and show kind of and to kind of just educate what is good neighbor authority and things and why it's important. So mostly education and raising awareness.
That sounds great, Jody. With those parameters, I'm in support.
Thank you, Jody. Thanks, Andrea, for your question. Any other questions? And I feel like there's a lot to be kind of flushed out here, so this is like a starting point. So I think I can't remember, Jody, if have you made a motion yet on this?
I will make a motion,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if that was possible, to as a high level concept, to move forward on the Capital Days education opportunity from the Forest Health Council with further details to be brought forward to the council for approval to move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great. Motion's been moved and we have a second as well. Any further discussion? And again, this is really kind of a high level concept of areas that need to be fleshed out a little bit more, but any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify as aye or yay.
Aye.
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 Any opposed, say no or nay. Okay, the ayes have it, and if you want to abstain, abstain as well. That's okay.
And Mr. Chair,
Awesome.
that's
Well,
all I
thanks.
have. That's all I have. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and working through that list with us. We appreciate your engagement. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to you and the committee for all your hard work on putting that together. Okay, I know we have a break coming up here soon, but before we do a break, let's move to Katie McGrath Novak, who's the chair of the Leveraging Resources Committee, who will give us an update on everything that they are doing. I know Brett Wolk will also assist as well, as I think he'll share with us the Forest Resilient Planning Guide that they've been working with. So let me turn it over to Katie first.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll just give a quick update from the committee generally, and then we will get into the Forest Resilience Planning Guide after that. So I've mentioned at the last couple of meetings that the Leveraging Resources Committee is kind of in a transition zone. We've been working really hard on this Forest Resilience Planning Guide for a while, and now figuring out what does the rest of 2025 look like for us. So in our last couple of meetings, we have determined that our sort of vision looking forward to the rest of the year is to align funding sources with forest planning needs for ease and equity of access. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to first identify some common challenges with accessing funding and resources, and then some possible solutions to overcoming them. So in our meeting on Monday, if anyone would like to join, we're going to go through a compilation of sort of existing information, things that we know are barriers to people who are looking for funding or other resources. And that way we have kind of a baseline understanding moving forward of what the challenges are. And then we'll be inviting both funder perspectives and fundee perspectives from different programs over the next few months, to try and understand what are the constraints from the funder perspective, what are their goals, that sort of thing. And then from the fundee perspective, what are the barriers to access? And then we'll merge those and have a conversation about what we can do to help better leverage resources across the state. So that's kind of our game plan moving forward. We'll be reaching out to some of the people on this council to hear their expertise. So you might be hearing from me in coming weeks. But also, as always, if you are interested or if you have ideas, please reach out to me or just show up to a meeting. They are open to all. Even if you don't want to officially join the committee yet, you can always join us for a couple meetings and see what you think, and then officially join later if you're interested. So that's kind of just the general committee update. And then our big exciting update for today is on the Forest Resilience Planning Guide, which we have a few slides for you. Courtney, do you want me to share them or?
Yes, I did just make you co-host,
Okay.
or I'm happy to share them as well, whatever you prefer.
That might be easier if you don't
Okay.
mind, just so I can see my
I would
notes.
be happy to. Let's see.
Courtney, are you sharing? We made some updates this morning, so are you sharing the Google directly from the Google Slides?
I just direct messaged you the link there, so
Perfect.
if you don't already have it open, Courtney, it's in the chat for you.
Thank you. And I'll let Brett kick us off.
I'll kick us off and we'll see how long I last. I'm pretty sick and going to sneeze and cough all over you during this presentation, so it's good we're not in the same room. And I apologize. But yeah, it is really exciting. This was, you know, a recommendation for a couple of years from the committee and the council, and there's a lot of hard work that went into it, and excited to share it. So let's go to the next slide. Just a reminder that there was a motion from the council in 2024 to develop the planning guide. And the purpose of the guide is to assist with positioning all areas and communities in Colorado to better leverage resources, knowledge share, and be competitive at receiving funding, with the ultimate goal to achieve effective forest health management and resiliency. So this is a framework for increasing the leveraging of resources. And then the 2025 motion was to kind of finish it up, punctuate development, build awareness, and finish the guide. So we have accomplished that. And if you want to go to the next one, Katie, or just the way that it's developed, the guide really, it provides a framework for aligning the collaboration, community values, and the technical and financial resources in shaping that forest management. So there's a lot of times there's a lot of excitement to do work, but it doesn't always align with the funding, or sort of how do you get the technical skills and the technical tools to make it happen on the ground and communicate what you're doing. And so this is not a directive of how to do something, but a guide to help people think about ways to better integrate that in their local context across Colorado. Because planning and implementing forest management across Colorado is different across the state based on the geographies and forests and communities that are there. So we're hoping that it assists Colorado communities, you know, working to collaborate, develop, and implement forest resilience strategies. It is designed for landscapes roughly the size of throughout a county or multiple adjacent counties. So people working at that level, doesn't mean you have to be a county commissioner or in the county government to do that. But as far as geographies and social geographies and landscape geographies, that's a geography that has seemed most useful for this kind of planning. And then again, the goal is to better mitigate, respond, and recover from common forest disturbances. So it's not just working on the mitigation and preparing for disturbances, but trying to work across all three of those phases as disturbance happen, because forests are dynamic and disturbances are part of how they remain resilient. Next one. The audience for this was determined to be two-part. One is for basically people on the ground who are implementing, planning, and designing and monitoring forest management activities. So the local agencies, large landowners, and place-based collaboratives to help improve coordination and forest management strategies and effectively leverage those resources. The second audience is directly for policymakers, program managers, and funding agencies to help better align their resources with the planning needs across Colorado.
So we're hoping that it sort of has those dual purposes. And when Katie, I'll turn over to Katie here in a second, goes through the different actions and sort of stages and how it's there, you can see how there's lots of detail about the different processes and all the different steps from start to finish of how to build robust forest resilience across Colorado. It helps identify all of those little components so that policymakers, program managers, and funding agencies can identify how to tweak those programs to best meet the needs of Colorado. The only other thing I'll add, I forgot to put a slide in, but we did lots of focus groups, had webinars, had meetings. So there's an author team of 7 or 8 folks that really spent a lot of time on it, but there was feedback from 100 or so more individual participants in many agencies across the state that contributed to this guide. So that's kind of the big picture overview. And then I was going to give it over to Katie to say what's actually in it.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett. And I hope you feel better. Sorry to make you talk. Yeah, so we have, if you look back at the recording from our last quarterly meeting, there's more of an in-depth discussion of what the guide includes, or now you can actually read the full guide yourself. But I'll just give kind of a high-level overview of what you can expect to find in the guide and how you might want to use it. So the kind of broad structure of the guide is based on the collaborative readiness framework. And that framework walks through 4 different key stages of readiness that someone at that kind of county, multi-county scale might work through as they go from establishing a community of partners around a shared vision, then translating that vision into strategy, translating that strategy into action, all the way up to adapting to new circumstances and sustaining momentum over time. So that's the 4 kind of key buckets of stages that we work through using this guide. And if you go to the next slide. So within each of those 4 big stages of readiness, we've identified anywhere from 3 to 5 more specific actions to actually get you through that stage of readiness. So I won't go through all of these, but you can see that there are 4 actions associated with establishing a community of partners around a shared vision, for example. And the goal with the guide is that you don't necessarily have to work 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down to 15. If your community is already, say, you've got a collaborative, you're just trying to figure out how to scale that collaborative up, you might start at step 10, or you might start at step 10 and then go back to step 6. But it's meant to be kind of a build your own adventure, and you can start the guide in various points. Next slide. So we've got our 4 stages of readiness. We've got a couple of actions for each stage of readiness. And then within each of those actions, this is kind of the meat of what you can actually expect to find to guide you through getting where you want to go. So each action includes some key questions, supporting resources outside of the guide, necessary capacity and expertise you can expect to need, an estimate of how much effort each action might take, an overview of it, and then my personal favorite part is activities, templates, and case studies to give you kind of real actionable examples of how to work through that action. Next slide. So that's a really brief overview of what you can expect to find in the guide and how you might use the guide. And I guess I'll stop here actually. And what we're hoping to get out of this today is to actually adopt this guide. Like Brett mentioned, this is the result of an administrative recommendation from one of our annual reports. So maybe I'll just make the motion now. I would like to motion to adopt the Colorado Forest Resilience Planning Guide, fulfilling our previous administrative recommendation from our last annual report. And then I'll get into the rest.
I'd like to second that if that's appropriate.
Okay, Katie made the motion and Clyde is seconding to support the Forest Resilient Planning Guide. Now let's open it up to any discussions and questions.
Chairman.
Yeah.
In the guide, I think there's some excellent links out to other resources. And those resources are still growing, and the mapping specifically, I think, is out there. And Brett's worked on that, primarily worked on that the most, I think. Do you want to address that?
So we did link to some resources, but we were also careful and conscious to not actually link to too many specific things, because we're realizing that technology and new tools are always being developed. And so it's a lot more of a framework of, in this stage, maybe you do want to do some mapping. Here are some things that you might consider before you choose one mapping program or tool over another. Because otherwise it would be it's already outdated, probably. There's new things coming on all the time. So that was there are lots of examples, but I think it's also hopefully a little more robust over time of here's sort of kind of the 4 collaborative stages of readiness and how you would move through building robust forest planning and implementation.
Okay, Mark Morgan. Mark, you have a question?
I printed off and read through your guide last night, and there's an awful lot of hard work in there, and I do appreciate your efforts. It can be kind of a dry subject, but it is a good how-to path to get something done, and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you for reading it. That's great.
Okay, other questions and comments? And remind me how this was, I can't remember how this was like funded too.
Brett,
It
you
was
want
funded.
Service?
It was funded primarily by the Colorado State Forest Service. So there was no funding directly from the council. There was a legislative recommendation to do it, and then the State Forest Service stepped up with some funding that ended up being not quite enough, and so Colorado Forest Restorations to put in a little bit on to top it off. And that funding went to hiring Laura Hickey and Lily Perot. I don't know if Lily's on the call today, but and they were facilitating and coordinating and did a lot of the compiling and writing of the guide, the graphic layout and all of those kind of things. So we absolutely could not have done it without their support and contributions as well.
Okay. Andrea.
Thank you for the presentation. As I'm looking at the visual of the applying the collaborative stages of readiness, and forgive me, I'm going to be honest, I have not seen the entire document besides the presentation. Are there any timelines associated with those stages? And do they take into account, whether communities are in a high-risk fireshed or in a wildfire crisis strategy landscape? I'm speaking selfishly, given that that's some of the closer.
Yeah, that's Katie, or you want me to?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I believe that's part of the yeah, there is like a rough timeline estimate, I think, with the big caveat that it kind of depends. And maybe Laura can speak more to how they determined the estimated capacity and timelines in the guide.
The guide itself, hi everyone, Laura Hickey, CDR Associates, does not actually lay out a specific timeline for each action. I'm not sure if the stages document itself does. Again, it's looks to be informative but not prescriptive. And it will look different for every landscape and every collaboration. Some folks, as we mentioned, might already be collaborating regularly and jump into kind of stage 3, but maybe they've spent 3 years already working on the things that are relevant in stage 1 and 2. So the speed of trust is what we always kind of refer back to, which isn't an exact timeline, but that's how the guide kind of works. Brett, I'm not sure if you can speak to the stages of readiness, if there are timelines associated.
No, and Andrea, to your question, it's meant for everywhere across Colorado. So not just like wildfire crisis strategy or anywhere It's meant for any group across the whole state to be able to, I think as a leveraging resources committee, we want to help things that are typically in priority areas at the state or federal or other kind of, prioritizations, but also the people that are not in those priority areas. How can they also leverage resources and continue to plan and implement resilient forest techniques? So each stage and each action does have sort of like, rather than a timeline, it says these are the resources you need to do this kind of activity. And that might be different everywhere you are. Some people look at that and they're like, oh, I got that. I know these people, we have these resources. We can do this. That's easy. And other people might look at that exact same action and say, oh my gosh, I have no idea how to do this. This is going to take years. And so I think it's more laying out, here are the different actions, here's the resources, here's the activities that are needed to let each, people implement that and develop that locally with how they.
Thanks for that clarity, and appreciate that that's something that I like to use as well. The moving at the speed of trust, and I guess the question was more along like, are we moving at the speed of the crisis as well? So not something necessarily that I expect that folks to have an answer to, just a thought.
I think one thing I want to point out is you saw the diagram of the 4 stages, and we talk about how it's kind of like an onion and you're peeling back different layers. But some people they get a big grant and they start implementing right away, but they didn't build trust before, or they didn't build good planning, or some of those earlier stages didn't happen. And so the guide is really useful, not just for people starting out in the beginning, but people at all different stages to say, wait, we're having some hiccups here. I wonder how we can improve our forest resilience and our planning. Let's go back and look, did we actually do all the steps in stage 1 and 2? Or what can we go back and add that would make our work better now? So it really is meant to be for all of Colorado, everyone working in forest resilience and management, no matter what stage you're at.
Thanks, Brett. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. Next questions from Clyde.
I was just going to say, second that comment about peeling the onion that Brett made, but secondly, going through from stage 1 to stage 5 moves faster dependent upon community stress and threat. And if they see an imminent wildfire threat, they start listening to the action plan that is out there. And hopefully somebody can step up and lead them through that if they're not exposed to it before they're threatened by fire. So maybe the speed of threat or the speed of risk, I'm not sure, is another term, but thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Thanks for this presentation, both Katie and Brett. It was great. Okay, we have a motion on the table to support the Forest Resilient Planning Guide. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposition, say nay or no. Okay, if you want to abstain, please just abstain too. Let us know in the chat as well. So yeah, tremendous work. And Brett, I hope you feel better too. Thanks for powering along. I know it's not fun to be in meetings when you're feeling miserable. So next we have a 10-minute break, but before we take a quick break, I know Courtney has something, but I also want to recognize that our regional forester, Troy Heathactor, has also joined us. And Troy, I want to just turn it over to you to introduce yourself as well, if you can.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's doing all right. It's active and interesting time for us federal employees right now, as you probably picked up in the news for those that aren't a federal employee. So yeah, lots of movement and lots of stuff that are lots of things that are unknown right now. But I think what we do know is that the work that we're all doing here collectively is super important and really critical right now, as much or more than ever. From my perspective and the lens that I'm looking at, having lived and worked in Colorado numerous times over my career, I'm a CSU grad, and looking at just the environment that's in front of us, and it's really a critical time I think Andrea was hitting on parts that we're really focused on too, is that are we able to scale up and start working at the scale of the crisis that we're at? And it's not easy here. I mean, the work is tough on federal lands. It's hard to get to. It's costly. It's challenging conditions to try and get more broadcast burning. All these things out there that are so critical to provide safe communities, but also sustainable, clean water supplies, recreation opportunities, all the things that are valuable to the way of life here in the West and Colorado specifically. And so really looking at that and addressing things in that way is some of my focus here, being in the role for about 7 months. And the bottom line is it's an all hands approach. It takes all of us. It takes folks from Xcel Energy I see on the call here, to the water providers, to community associations, because it's not just a federal land challenge that we're facing. It crosses jurisdictions and boundaries. There's a huge need for us to create fire adapted communities in alignment with the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Strategy, in addition to resilient landscapes. And we already work really well here in Colorado on a coordinated response, which is the third tier of that cohesive strategy. So I'm really happy to be here, be part of this group. And even though we're in some uncertain times right now, especially today on the federal workforce and what it's going to look like, there's a ton of opportunities in front of us. And again, more than ever, I think it's the partnerships and the relationships we have with you all in these groups and being coordinated in our efforts that are going to help us sustain and hopefully increase the amount of work and services we can deliver to the public.
Well, thanks, Troy. Really glad you can join us today, and I've really been impressed with working with you, and we communicate often. And actually, even before Troy was officially on the job, he actually traveled out to Carbondale for an event on the Thompson Divide and kind of minimal withdrawal and protecting Red Lady Bowl and the Crested Butte area. So I was impressed that you're still on the clock, I'm sure, but not really in your official role technically, but really glad you're able to do that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay. Before we have a break too, I understand, I think Katie and maybe Brett have more to present too, so I want to turn it back over to them before we break.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. We just have a couple more little slides here and hopefully generate a little bit of discussion. Troy actually brought up a really good point, which is kind of what we want to discuss, is how can this council make the most of this guide? We have a lot of different perspectives and expertise represented on this council, and so we're wondering how we can bring all of us together to try and encourage more sort of connections across the state. How can we share this across the state? How can it be used across our different sectors, et cetera? So we just wrote a couple of guiding questions here. So like, who needs to know about this guide? What's the best way to communicate it? One way that we discussed is having sort of a communications packet that any Forest Health Council member can take and go present at individual conferences. But we're just curious, hopefully now that you've had a couple of presentations about what is included in it, and Brett, I think, gave really good context about who this is really targeted at. Yeah, where can we go? We want to make sure that this document really lives on and has the impact that we know it has the potential to have.
Okay, we'll just open it up and see if anyone has any recommendations or comments on this.
Yeah, I'll point out in the chat, Amy Moyer just shared this would be a great tool to connect with the Rural Grant Navigator program from House Bill 1006 that we mentioned earlier. That is a perfect idea. That's a really good example of where we would like this to be used. And also with the Leveraging Resources Committee, as we work through what are some of the barriers to people accessing funding and resources, we plan to reference the guide to see where do people typically get hung up, where is funding typically directed, where is there not funding directed, things like that too. And I think I saw somebody maybe starting to unmute.
I was just gonna make a recommendation. Many of us represent different entities, right? We have county commissioners where, maybe through their channels, you can let CCI know and CCAT know. Um, for any folks connected with municipalities, they could let Colorado Municipal League know. Through our channels, we can send out, Facebook and Twitter and kind of, I guess, X, different like kind of social media distribution to get the word out that these tools are available. So I think we should think about like, what kind of networks we have individually and see if we can get the word out as one recommendation.
Yeah, that all sounds great. Thank you. Well, I know that we're cutting into our break, so maybe we can leave it there. Maybe if you have an idea during the break, go ahead and put it in the chat so we'll have that record for later. That would be great. And yeah, just we're so excited to see this go through. Thanks to everyone who's put in hard work. Go ahead and pat all those people on the back who are on this slide. Thanks.
Yeah. And I'll just echo thanks to the council and everyone who worked on this. It was definitely a team effort. And I think ideas about venues to take this or audiences is great, but also different kinds of resources that would be needed to help make this. So online resources, presentations, videos, like Katie or me or other people to like go and talk. Those kind of ideas would be good. And I do want to throw out there, it is very much for people implementing things on the ground, but also for the state legislature and program managers and those funding agencies as well. So I think that's another audience to make a target in some different ways. Could I throw in just a very quick one more 30-second update on the Leveraging Resources Committee?
Sure.
I just want to highlight, this is not a recommendation or officially through the legislative committee or Leveraging Resources, I think. But the Colorado Forest Tracker, we had a soft release in December-ish and are planning a more public, wider release in the coming weeks. So I'll hit, it is live, you can look at it. And as Troy was talking about, we're doing lots of work across Colorado, and this is helping now, just making it transparent. What is happening where with our forest management and the wildfires? So we can see that, and everyone can see that where it's happening. So that is, again, it was sort of a soft release. It's a public website, anyone can go there. And we'll do more public outreach soon.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much. Any other follow-up questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, how about we take a few minute break and come back at how about 11:35? Does that sound good? Give us time for a quick snack, go for a quick walk. Okay, I'll see you all back at 11:35. Bye-bye. Okay, we're all ready to rock and roll. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a nice little break. Next, our agenda item is we're going to talk about the 30-year vision for forest health in Colorado. A big thank you for Becca Samowski for helping to facilitate our ongoing discussions that we've had. We've been talking about this. I'm trying to think, for looking at my team, probably for about a year or so, coming up to a year, a little less than a year. And so big thank you, Becca, for your for stepping in to help us, move the discussion and dialogue along and help us figure out the sweet spot here. So let me turn it over to Becca to discuss kind of where we're at right now. And then I believe that we also want to potentially have a motion at the end of that to support the recommendations. So Becca, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Director Gibbs. And I'll
I'm excited to be here to share the progress on what I hope will be ready to adopt as the 2055 vision for forest health for us to all start aspiring toward together um, from after today. Yeah, I think my first meeting with you was last summer, and that was really just an overview. So really just getting going in the fall months this last fall to dive in and work on building the vision piece of this. And throughout December and January, we connected. We collected comments, and there weren't a huge number of comments back on the draft vision that you all reviewed on your last meeting. There was about 14, but there was some really good feedback from people who clearly care about the future of forest health in the state. There were a few state Forest Service staff, an extension person, NOCO Fire Shed, Northern Water, Wild Turkey Federation, U.S. Forest Service, a couple Wildfire Council representatives, one independent forest management consultant, and private citizens, people who both identified as that, and then, of course, as well as everybody who responded. So I am hopeful that you'll be able to adopt the proposed vision piece of this today, both illustrated and the words. It's going to be challenging to get any tweaks done to the illustration at this point, but hopefully you all will like it. And if there are any minor changes to the wording that someone feels really strongly about, you could also move to adopt the proposed vision with specific minor changes in the language, if there's something that really catches your attention today. I think we have a really pretty and beautiful and descriptive vision that's going to help people to get on the same page and provide a solid foundation for goal setting and strategies moving toward the vision. And also keep in mind that 10 years down the road, at some point in the future, we realize that something is missing or something needs to change. You can always add future updates to it. So bear with me a moment while I get my screen share going. You see my boy, okay. Okay, are you getting my slide now? Just background slide
Yes,
here.
we can see it.
All right, so this is a new piece that got considered after the comments were shared, that we need an easy, succinct way that we all can talk about the forest health vision without memorizing paragraphs of information to be able to capture the main theme areas of the vision. And so here's some language for that is proposed as kind of the top overarching words that then have further descriptions of each of the themes. So this is hopefully a quick way to try to get the 5 themes all into what you would say about what does forest health look like in Colorado. Colorado forest health manifests as functioning forest ecosystems, resilient watersheds, and landscape and communities adapted to fire through a mindset and culture shift, cross-boundary collaboration, diverse and consistent funding, and forest product markets. So those are all the themes, pretty much as succinctly as possible, wrapped into one sentence. This came from feedback from people reviewing the vision saying, yeah, but that's a lot. How do we have that? How can we have a way to remember what all of these theme areas are? It would be nice if there was a way to kind of group them into a sentence. So that is brand new language to you pretty much today and with what was shared out. But I think you'll see as we go through here how it all fits together and is further described. So this was the original illustrated vision that got sent out for review. I didn't fully capture all of the forest health themes, and it had a few extra words scattered around on it. All the feedback that we got about the illustrated graphic were very positive with a few suggestions. A couple people didn't like the fuel break, both the word and it maybe looks a little bit stark up there on that rim. There was also some confusion about what the gal at the desk was up to, especially with kind of where she's sitting. Is she writing a forest management plan? Was one of the comments, or what is she doing there? So that piece clearly needed to be a little bit better associated with the mindset and culture shift, which wasn't really written anywhere because that theme hadn't been formalized at the point when we had the artist working with us live. So we wanted to more clearly associate that with lifelong learning and the mindset and culture shift theme. The fire lighter over there on the right also seemed to be a little bit out of place. And workforce development is not an explicit theme, but it lays out in a banner here like maybe it is, whereas it's kind of incorporated throughout with less of buzzword language within the vision language that we'll reflect on here in a minute. So I'll show you the proposed illustration. So a few changes here. You can see more of this pretty graphic. All of the themes are incorporated into the banners and or ribbons or whatever you want to call them. And more, and those are the only words. The main themes are the only words that carry through onto this. So original banner over here left forest out of functioning ecosystems. That got added in. We brought the mindset and culture shift here to the middle, and the gal experiencing lifelong learning about forests down here next to that as well. Moved the fire burner and made sure that whole theme around diverse, consistent funding and forest product markets was incorporated into the language. So I will pause there for a second and just see if there's any reflections on the graphic piece before I move on to the written pieces. At least give you a second to absorb and look at it a little bit more.
It's a lot to look at. Okay. Yeah, Jody,
It's a lot
question, comment?
It's super, again, I think this whole ability to have the artists kind of, do this as we were working and talking is phenomenal. I love the whole concept. And I understand why maybe some of those comments and adjustments, they kind of make sense. I look at the upper right-hand corner, it seems a little less populated or sparse. And so the one thing I was wondering, we have the cross-boundary collaboration, but after kind of thinking about some of the comments we had earlier today about shared stewardship, and I didn't know if that was something we maybe wanted to have kind of highlighted somewhere on here as well. Just not going to push for that, but I just wondered if that was another buzzword. I don't know if or all those ribbons just kind of the themes and
the ribbons are just the theme. So we actually explicitly took the other language out of this. And there was some like pre and post fire restoration language associated with the graphic in that upper right-hand corner, which did maybe fill up a little bit more space, but was also like this badge that was a big badge on something that can actually be a fairly contentious topic, to even use the restoration word. And whereas with, showing kind of the diversity of landscapes there, I think fit better with what we've discussed within the kind of functioning ecosystems and diverse forests concepts. But that comment about shared stewardship did come up in the written language, and you'll see where that word actually got added, or that phrase got added, that was not in the language previously. So maybe that will address that topic as well.
Great, I appreciate that, and thank you. That's helpful.
I see Mark.
Yes, somehow, and I understand there's still an educational component in this. It doesn't have to be workforce development or whatever, but there's an educational component in there all the way up and down the line for legislators, for the public, for users, citizens. I just think that I don't have a specific suggestion, but I just think there's a piece missing there. We're going to advance this whole vision in forest health. The educational part of this has to be part of our culture. Maybe that's where the mindset and culture shift is, and you've got it covered. I don't know, but I guess I would, if there was a way to stress that, it would be a suggestion. That would be all I had.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see as we go through the verbiage if that helps to address that at all. And then also at the close today, I also hope to really think about how you all are going to use this. And I think that's a huge part of it is where this gets posted and how we kind of push this out collectively as something that we're all seeing and doing. Look at the words. So what I've done here is I'm going to show you on each slide, I'm going to show you each theme, what it looked like on the right-hand side when we looked at this at your last quarterly meeting and said this is good for public review, what the verbiage recommended changes are from that on the left-hand side, discuss why that is so, and then show you what the language looks like now and let you absorb it quickly kind of on your own. So I'm going to step through each of these 5 themes in that manner. So Mr. Morgan, that was actually a really great segue on the mindset and culture shift, because the confusion of people looking at this gal here and saying, what is she doing? Which there was actually a couple comments about that. Part of the challenge we thought was this piece about lifelong learning being down at the bottom of mindset and culture shift. So the first change that was made to this section was to take this concept of forest knowledge embedded in lifelong learning and move this up to the top and have this first. Within this statement, once we moved it to the top, the second half of the sentence about what happens through this lifelong learning, fostering a shift in how people steward their forests, support forest management, nurture resilient communities, and coexist with fire, backed up with active stewardship, like 2 sentences in a row. So that felt a little bit weird. So what we did with that piece was take that second half, and it's now here in the middle. So this is really just a flow thing, but it keeps all of the concepts of what we do now. We all embrace our stewardship roles and support forest management, nurture resilient communities, and accept fire's roles in the environment. The change from coexist with fire to fire's roles in the environment was also based on comments that we got where somebody felt like fire's role in the environment wasn't explicitly acknowledged anywhere in the language that we had. And so this seemed like an easy way to just change a couple of words and acknowledge that it's not just about living with fire, but also acknowledging that living with fire that fire has a role in the environment. So all of that's still in here in a slightly different way. The first half of this sentence, or of this, what used to be forest knowledge is embedded in lifelong learning. Oops, sorry. So that got cut in half, and I got suggestions. This is largely from DNR staff looking at the way that this read, that it felt like the grounded in forest experiences was possibly exclusive or excluding people who don't have the opportunity to get into our forests as much from the opportunity to also appreciate and understand our forests. And so there was just a slight change to how that sentence reads, to still get this appreciation of forest ecosystems grounded in lifelong learning, and kind of add that often rooted in forest experiences. So there's this push and pull discussion there that's led to this recommended final language, that we do still want to keep pushing GOCO efforts and efforts to get people into the outdoors and to have forest learning experiences and outdoor learning experiences. But you still don't have to have that all of the time in order to also build an understanding and appreciation of forest ecosystems. So very nuanced. This is very nitpicky, but that's what happens. And thankfully there were people willing to help us with this in the background, so we didn't have to have those conversations at this scale. And this was the one that changed the most. So just fair warning, hopefully. They won't all be um, this much red to look at. The only other thing that shifted on this one was ditching the valuing and, so making this a shorter sentence. There were a couple different interpretations of what the valuing meant there. And when I ran through this with DNR staff, we felt like that was already captured in a couple of different places, in both that appreciation of forest piece that Nell reads in the very first opening sentence, as well as within the diverse and consistent funding and forest product markets. There's some actual like valuation of forest services in that section. So I'm going to show you, let you reflect on this and read this for yourselves, and then take any feedback on this piece.
Becca, are you open to feedback at this point, or is it, I recognize you're far
I am
along in the
open to
process,
very
so.
minor changes. I mean, I have to be. This is at the whim of you all. So changes to verbiage are much easier than the illustration. So please share.
Yeah, the only thing I would just put out there is maybe in the last sentence of that first paragraph saying, recognize and accept fire's roles in the environment. I think it's just a little bit more than accepting. And you talked about it in, as you were describing the conversations, but I think recognizing that fire plays an important role in the environment is an important piece, along with, sort of living compatibly with it.
Yeah, I feel like I saw an extra comma in this one too when I was reading through it today. So recognize and accept. We have a suggestion for that. Is there anybody who's opposed to adding that extra word? Just real quickly.
Can I just add to that real quick? I was actually agreeing. That was my comment too, was, and I don't know if we add fire's beneficial roles in the environment just to highlight that there is a benefit
Yeah,
to
I like
this.
that too.
What happens when we add words, and there's a lot of picking we've got to do. We do need to keep in mind that it's long already. So we have a suggestion for and recognize and accept fire's beneficial roles in the environment. Is there anybody, and I see a couple other hands up, but if it's not related to this, I'll hold that. Any other anybody that's not okay with that or feels? Mine is related. I guess I have two thoughts. One is, do we want to assume that all of fire's roles in all of its environments are beneficial? Because I do think there are times when maybe it feels less beneficial. And then I did also get caught up on the word accept, just because I feel like there's accepting, like, okay, yeah, I guess I'll just roll over and accept it because I have to, versus like really embracing something. So I don't know if there's a word. I don't know. I don't want to get too nitpicky about it, but I wonder if maybe just something that's a little bit even more than accepting and actually like a step further, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah, we do already have embrace in the prior sentence, so I would suggest not necessarily using the same word there. Oh yeah, we don't want to repeat. If anyone has a different suggestion on the coexist with, or a different suggestion on how to get from there to the role in the environment, I am open to that. And I can also we can also pin this for wordsmithing outside of full group too if we don't come back with a great suggestion. So I might let some people brainstorm on that a little bit. Did Mark or Paige or Lynn have something to add to that piece?
I had just a part in the bottom about all your benefits, diverse services forests provide. Also, forest products. We have a very much a forest products industry in Colorado that needs to be expanded to be able to do the management work that you want to do. So
I'm
now,
glad you said that, Mark, because when I was rereading it just now, I was looking at it going, we probably should call that out, but I'm glad that you brought that up. So that would be a suggestion to maybe somewhere including clean water, habitat, carbon storage, forest products, and sustainable recreation opportunities, or something like that.
yep, that'd be fine.
Okay, so we have a couple suggested changes. Anybody, if you have a challenge to that, maybe drop it in the chat. If you don't want to add forest products to this section, of course we have it later, but it would be maybe remiss to not uh, call it out as a diverse service of the forest in this section. So popping back up, Paige or Lynn, did you have anything on this kind of fire's role in the environment piece?
Yes, I did. And it follows a little bit along what Katie had to say, because fire does have a beneficial role, but I do have concerns that if we put fire's beneficial role, it would exclude all of the detrimental roles that fire plays. So I don't know if it should be fire's various roles or leaving it is. I just wanted to mark that it seems absolute either way or could be construed that way.
Yeah. Recognize that. Paige,
So I
you
was
wanna add?
also going to just build on Katie's point, and I do, I hear the point that was just made, but in my mind, recognizing fire's beneficial roles does kind of single out the ecological benefits and differentiate from, potentially destructive wildfire impacts. So, I like your idea of potentially wordsmithing offline, Becca, but I do think that incorporating, the fire's beneficial roles in the environment does differentiate from, in my mind, from negative impacts. So maybe there's some way to play with that.
If I can, I'm gonna totally mess up my screen share if I try to do it in here. Can I try and, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to grab it without escaping. Sorry. Somebody wants to take a stab at different language there. I am open to it. I think something like just and recognizing beneficial roles of fire in the environment or something like that could be a switch that gets rid of accept and kind of doesn't make it exclusive to all roles being beneficial, but that we recognize the beneficial roles or something like that. So, will a couple of you who have thoughts on this keep mulling it over in your minds, and let's come back to that. I don't see any, not seeing anybody giving any kickback to adding forest products to the diverse services forests provide, so I think we're okay with that. And while we ponder the how to get fire's role in the environment here, or if this is the best place for it, because if we come back to it, you might want to plug it in somewhere else instead. Or is there anything else on this one anybody takes any issue with? Go ahead, Katie. Mm-hmm. I just had one more thought. at the beginning, we talk about understanding and appreciating forest ecosystems, lifelong learning, and often rooted in forest experiences. I was just wondering if that encapsulates like there's learning through experience, but then there is also the learning through direct outreach and education. And do we want to make that a little bit more explicit that we're not just expecting people to learn just through their experiences in the outdoors, but we do want to integrate it into schools and into programming like Live Wildfire Ready campaign, things like that. And maybe that is clear, but I just wanted to throw that out there as a potential thing.
In my mind, that's encompassed in lifelong learning. To me, that's from, start to end there, which would include like school age and youth, but do others have any feedback on that? Or care strongly? Go ahead, Mark.
I agree with Katie in the fact that there needs to be an outreach component. I hate to wordsmith and nitpick efforts like this because they're so hard to do in the first place, but the educational component of it is really important to me. We need to actively educate the public, our youth, legislators. That's what I was referring to earlier.
Yeah, I guess the one piece of push that back that I might give here is that this is the vision, this isn't the goals and strategies. And I think that if we try to get all of the strategies into this vision, it will never be there. And so that's really the next step, is to say, okay, how do we build an appreciation of our forest ecosystems
I'm fine with that.
through outreach?
I don't want to lose the thought. Other than that, you got a plan for it. I'm fine with it.
Okay. Does that address your concerns, Katie?
Yeah, I agree with Mark. As long as there's a plan, that's fine by me.
Hey, anything else on this one? All right, I'm going to keep us moving forward in the interest of time here. These ones are hopefully less robust changes, but there is a lot of content to functioning forest ecosystems and resilient watersheds. So there was a suggestion that we actually use healthy forests. I have a little bit of a bias against using a term to define itself in a sense, but I think because this is starting saying that this is what forests represent, I think it's fair to add the healthy component here into the functioning forest and ecosystems. I think it's a really solid way to do it early in the vision. So that's where healthy came from. Also, this was just a very long sentence. And mixed feelings about leaving something this flowery in the vision. So if people, everybody really agrees that they really hate it, it could go out entirely potentially. But this has been shortened a little bit to just vibrant green growth instead of every hue of green growth and grassy slopes. Oops. Somebody wanted more wildlife. How do we bring that in more, and suggested the bugling elk, which is also in the graphic piece. So that's kind of a nice tie in there. Oh, I'm trying to point instead of scroll. I apologize. And then there was a desire to add insects and diseases. While changing climate conditions and disturbances is broad, we had felt the need to call out wildfire and post-fire flooding explicitly, and with people commenting back that they thought we needed to acknowledge insects and disease somewhere within the vision, this felt like a good place to do that. Well, this is where they suggested we do that. So those are the only changes to functioning forest ecosystems and resilient watersheds. I'm going to show you what it looks like in its proposed final stage, and then take feedback on that. Yeah, Paige.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tricky piece just because there's so many aspects you could highlight. I don't see any reference here sort of to our previous conversation about the role of fire in functioning forest ecosystems and resilient watersheds. So that's definitely something I would suggest integrating.
It's the whole next theme, Paige.
It also, pardon me?
It's the whole next theme.
Oh, okay. Okay. So maybe I'll wait and see that, but maybe it makes sense to include here as well. This is also kind of management focused, and rather than sort of the balance of management and natural functioning. So be happy to take a longer look. And, you know, I haven't really dug into this previously, so I recognize others have been much more engaged, but that's what strikes me, that this is really reflective of kind of a management view.
Okay. Yeah, I think there may be a piece in the next section that appeases some of what you're thinking about as well. So we'll see. Samantha.
Yeah, thanks, Becca. I would not be opposed to getting rid of the first sentence if we're just trying to shorten it. I feel like some of that is encompassed in the other two paragraphs. And perhaps this is just ignorance on my part, but I'm not quite sure what is meant by a mosaic of growth and disturbance.
Yeah, so, you know, hopefully some of this reflects as well in what you're seeing in the actual illustrated vision piece of it. That was, I thought, a pretty clever way from some members of the Forest Health Council who are forestry folks who were trying to come up with a way to succinctly talk about the diversity of what forests look like. So the mosaic would be that there's different pieces and areas where we have forests that are growing and that they're also changing and that they're being disturbed. And that's supposed to be reflected in the rest of that sentence where there's the range of tree species, ages, sizes, native understories. You know, that's a mosaic there with the different things. Originally the grassy green slopes kind of meadow side of it that got taken out of the language in the top piece was also kind of a stab at including open spaces within our forests. But disturbance also gets at that really well in two places in this section. So when we say and disturbances, those are spelled out in the second paragraph. I don't know if that helps a little. Christina and then Mark.
Yeah, I can address some of the comments. And so I worked on this with Frank Falzone within RCS and Madeline at Denver Water. And that you're exactly right in the mosaic with the disturbance. It was a way to capture some of Paige's points about fire. And we were a little bit nervous or hesitant in the direction for how we represent fire and other disturbances in the forest that are necessary for the ecosystem benefits. So I'm not opposed to altering any of this based on people's feedback, but I just wanted to explain that that's where that mosaic and kind of disturbances came from and just some of the rationale behind it. As far as like the picture, like the flowery stuff, we really debated about that too. And we all, we put that in there because I feel like a lot of folks in Colorado actually don't know what our forests are supposed to look like. And so we thought maybe giving some of that visualization in the vision would help make that connection. But again, I'm not opposed to either calling out more fire or removing the flowery language. I just wanted to explain some of our rationale as we were composing some of this. So thank you.
Thanks, Christina. And I will try and move this along a little faster as I can. Go ahead, Mark.
I actually really like the use of the terms mosaic and the disturbances. I think those are critical to a healthy forest. They leave it open to cover natural disturbances, all different kinds of disturbances, not just fire, flood, insects. All of these disturbances occur, and the mosaic of our forests is a really important concept. And frankly, I like it really well, just as written. Whatever, but I think
Thank you.
I think you've captured it very well.
Cool. Yeah, that was a fun team to work with those guys and
And
narrowing
it's
it
very
down.
inclusive. It really is inclusive.
And I will just point out that I feel like this first sentence also really clearly depicts the graphic now, from snow-capped peaks to clear streams and this mosaic, the green. And I feel like it's a really good, if you can't see the picture and you're just reading the language somewhere, it brings that in a little bit. And it's one of the few places where any of it gets flowery. So, yeah, unless like everybody wanted to take that out, I think that's something that's already been well hashed through. And we need to focus on things that are deal breakers for folks for the most part at this point. Okay. Yeah, and thanks, Samantha. That's just like if we want to shorten it, you'll see here in a minute how it right now kind of fits together nicely in a poster with the words that we have without a need to shorten, I don't think. So any other feedback?
I put a note in the chat,
fire
Becca, about potentially adding ecologically appropriate before mosaic of growth and disturbance, which might sort of hint at the fire piece, as well as making sure that what we're looking for is not just any sort of range of growth and disturbance or tree species, but something that's appropriate to the ecosystem.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Paige. I get that. And then I also am concerned that if we put in terminology like ecologically appropriate, people are just going to look at it and say, what does that mean? Right? If we don't spell that out all the way. And that's almost one of those spaces where I feel like, is that something that we put a pin in and make sure that that's descriptive in the goals and strategies that relate to this vision? Or do we add ecologically appropriate in front of a mosaic of growth and disturbance? Anybody have any strong feelings about that? Anybody? How about you after I said that, Paige? I don't know how that sits with you versus, yeah, let's add it if nobody's opposed.
I still feel like it would be important to me, and I think it conveys an important concept, because we do have a lot of conversations about what kind of management is appropriate where, what kind of disturbance is expected versus, disruptive. So in my mind, it's meaningful, but I'm just one voice, of course.
Is there another way of saying it that's less like you got to dig into the science to figure out what's ecologically appropriate on this place, in this particular spot? Like, is there another way of saying that gets at the same idea? I'm not opposed to adding ecologically appropriate. I'm just saying, like, I feel like it's one of those terms that isn't super publicly accessible, maybe. Mark, do you have a thought related to that or something else?
I'm just having trouble, I guess, with that concept. Any number of things happen on the forest. We get bugs. Bugs have helped manage our forest. A lot of bugs are endemic to our forest, and sometimes we get outbreaks or infestations, but there's all kinds of things that are disturbance events on the forest, and there's any number of them. We've had large wind throws over the years, large bugs. I don't think you can I don't know whether it's appropriate or inappropriate. It's just a fact and it exists. So that's kind of why I liked the wordage that you had, because it's inclusive of all of those, the reality of all of those, and that we work to deal with them. So
And I
don't-
think,
you
I guess
can't
I would
decide
say that
what's
both,
appropriate. You know, some people might think that a bug infestation is appropriate. It's another management tool. I've had people tell me in the soils people that fairly large forest blowdowns are appropriate because when the tree goes over, it pulls up the stump and you have a source of movement of soil. And sometimes that could be good. You're breaking up soil. So I don't know. Appropriate, I guess, to me is in the eye of the beholder.
so I guess I would also add like the sentence directly in front of it. It is management heavy. I will agree with that. But the whole intention is to say that through management, we're continually evaluating and improving the outcomes of forest management activities. And these resulting forests are such and such. So, and that's more saying from management activities, these are the resulting forests. It's not saying all forests in the state are completely managed to the T. For one, it's saying because of continually evaluating and improving outcomes of forest management activities, the resulting forests have this diversity. So it's trying to get at that diversity of growth and disturbance, including through how managers are looking at the landscapes. But like I said, I'm not opposed to adding it. Does anybody want to add any final thoughts to that piece? Make a recommendation as to add or no. And if we need to vote on this piece directly, we can. Or somebody will add it in the motion with or without. Okay.
I actually, I just want to jump in. There's definitely been a lot of discussion on some of these. So Becca, I want you to continue to kind of go through what you have. We have our Zoom till 1 o'clock, and I want to make sure we get to member updates too. So what I propose is, definitely continue, and this is really great. I'm really excited that there's a lot of feedback, but let's wait to vote on the whole package till our April meeting. They'll just give folks a little bit more time to look it over. I think that make most sense.
Yeah, I understand. Sounds good. I will try to cruise through this, sir. And that's helpful. That will give folks who maybe have not been able to look at this over the last 6 months a chance to take a closer look and give some feedback at the whole package. So if you have any specific feelings about the ecological benefits piece, then please add those as well in the chat. And I hear you, Paige. I'll make sure that we get more feedback from you on this section later. Fire adapted forests and communities. Also not a whole lot of changes to this section. There was a question about what are disproportional impacts. And so we felt like maybe there was a need to add a clarifying word of socially disproportionate impacts. Again, that's probably more buzzwordy than ecologically appropriate. So recognize that there. There was also concern about stating completely that fires, that buildings and infrastructure don't burn. And so this was changed from no longer to rarely ignite from flames or burning embers. And then just shortening when fires outpace forest and community resilience. It's seldom fast fires, is probably just buzzy and unnecessary. This whole section includes sections and where wildfires burn. Oops. Yeah, I'll let you guys look at it like that actually. Within pre-planned perimeters, among a mosaic of forest treatments, natural and maintained fuel breaks, and past fire footprints. And this is the section page that I was thinking might get a little bit at some of what you were thinking about in terms of the whole kind of diversity of natural disturbances out there as well, but this is more specific to fire in this section. We'll let you all review that. And based on this section, which I think is kind of the bigger meat of the explanation of what the landscape looks like versus the management, how we get there, hopefully that completes the picture a little bit more for some of you. Does anybody have any deal-breaking items or items that we need to come back to in this section to put a pin in? Let's see. Beneficial role of fire. Where are you seeing that in
Yeah,
here?
I don't have any problem with the language here. I think it's fine. The point about the beneficial role of fire is more, in my mind, part of what is entailed in a functioning forest ecosystem, which was more what the focus of the previous slide was. So that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, and it has this recognizing the ecological role of fire safely right within this as well. So that was kind of a question to me in the first one and why I wanted to get to this first of maybe we don't worry about wordsmithing that in the mindset and culture shift and keep it to this section. And is it met already? And can we just say coexist with wildfire in the first one? So we'll come back to that and explore that further. Julie.
Yeah, Becca, I mean, as I look at how this has evolved, I guess in my mind, the utility sentence is probably more appropriate as the second sentence in the second paragraph. So such that the second paragraph would start through voluntary and regulatory approaches, etc. So you're talking about the larger community and how that works. You're talking about utilities as a part of those communities, and then talking about, restoration activities and efforts should a fire occur.
That makes sense. It does seem like a better flow. I had somebody ask, like, is this, we can't make the utilities do anything in the comments back. And I'm like, actually, this, you were involved in developing this, and it's the idea that utilities want to get to this place, right? So I appreciate that. So suggestion of just switching the sentences in that second
just the
paragraph.
order. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, but I don't have the word in my mouth at the moment to share with you. I think the concept is right in the utility sentence. Generally speaking, with the vision being that two things happen. The systems themselves are hardened and the infrastructure is hardened. And that is really twofold as you've put here, right? To prevent ignitions, but also, I'm not sure the word, I guess the word that's getting me here is substantially. Maintain service during passing wildfires. It is to hopefully maintain service when a passing wildfire occurs, but it also enables the utility to quickly restore service due to minimize damage, right? Should a wildfire occur. So sorry, something just about the word substantial.
Just simplifying that sentence and just saying and maintain service through wildfires or something like that. So through could be like before, during, after.
Yeah, I think it's restore and maintain. Maintain or restore is really what it is.
And you don't like the substantially?
Not really.
Okay, maintain. So we have a suggestion to make it like maintain or restore.
Yeah.
This is aspirational too. So if we're, or restore service through wildfires instead of passing, and then it can get kind of to the back end of them as well. Does that?
I think that during passing wildfires is right.
Okay.
Without getting too in the weeds with folks, I think aspirational in this space is, when utilities think about public safety power shutoffs, right? If there's a wildfire coming, how do you manage that? And I don't know that you want to get into the weeds of that in this statement.
Yeah, that would be strategy. Cool. That's helpful. Thanks, Julie. If anybody has problems with that piece, please drop it in the chat and go ahead, Mark.
Just real quick, in their hardened infrastructure and everything, is it appropriate? I'm not saying it is, but is it appropriate to mention the maintenance of the right of ways? Is that what you're going to call part of your infrastructure? But the ability to maintain your right of ways for these utilities, because that's a pretty substantial part of your infrastructure, I guess. It's not like poles or wires or anything else or towers, but it's a key part of your ability to do what you were just saying.
I couldn't agree with you more, Mark. I think where that concept, at least in the original drafts, was more picked up was in that second sentence that's shifting to the first sentence, right? Where we talk about voluntary and regulatory approaches to including vegetation management. We think about that in relation to our utility rights of way. Other people may think of vegetation management in terms of their dispensable space to their structures. So I think that verbiage was intended to cover more than just utilities.
Yep. And I think we can get into that one within strategies as well.
Yep.
Would be great. Okay. We're getting there. We're close. I didn't think this would all take quite as long, but I realized everybody has a ton of time to look at these in advance. I'm going to move to these last two fairly quickly. Again, not a huge amount of verbiage changes. This is where, and one of you brought this up earlier, the shared stewardship piece. While not floating Commissioner McNally in the graphic vision right now, this collaborative shared stewardship approach, that verbiage was recommended to be added in to cross-boundary collaboration, as well as adding federal into the programs that actively and equitably support forest health. So making sure to call that out. I'm gonna pop forward to how it. Oh, maybe I didn't make a copy of this one just because it was so few changes that I felt like you could read it like this. I know it's smaller though. So a little bit of how we do work together. Anything here that somebody feels strongly needs to change? When there's fewer words on a slide, there's less to nitpick. But also maybe we've got this cross-boundary collaboration thing down, or at least heading in the right direction. Or we've lost everybody for lunch meetings. And then this last section, diverse, consistent funding, forest product markets. There was just a shift in the stable and diverse baseline funding suggestion to move that to the top because it was a more inclusive statement. So that's just a switch in the second sentence to the first sentence, as we've had in a couple places for flow. And then there was a few suggestions to incorporate sustainable and innovation into this forest product aspect. And so those were added here in the first sentence of the second paragraph. Somebody had a lot of different opinions about what biomass is, and that term does get used in a lot of different ways. So making that broader to wood processing facilities. And then also acknowledging that there's all these great things that come from and are being used as forest products. It's not just about the use of those or having outlets for them, but also that we can use these great forest products for a variety of things in the state. And I'm going to let you guys read it as proposed final. And that's the last bit of language around the diverse, consistent funding and forest product markets theme. Lot packaged into a little bit of space. Anything that anyone feels strongly needs to change in this section? I like that, Mark. I like your no on that. This is your section.
It's fine.
Very cool. So maybe a couple of word changes in mindset, culture shift, and in these first three. Here's just a sample poster, which will have those changes when they're done, and hopefully you all can print out and post in all of your places. So that's one version of this, but we'll have all of these sections separately too. So this is kind of how this is the next iteration of the poster piece that got shared with you guys as a preview. Obviously a few changes there and trying to capture this overall set of themes up top. And then we'll have to do a little bit of adjusting to get to the final here. So to your guys' next meeting, hopefully we'll be able to adopt this with those few changes in words, and I'll work with the DNR team on those few changes that I jotted down today. Sounded like we don't have anything that's way off, just a couple of confusing areas still from the adjustments that were made. And then I do have lists of folks who want to work on goals and strategies for each of these sections, so you'll be hearing from me to start convening now that we're super close on the vision and goal and the vision piece, to start convening around goals and strategies and a more short-term duration for those. So that's just my updated timeline, but I think I need to turn it back over to you guys. And thank you for letting me share this with you all today.
Great. Thank you, Becca. Huge appreciation from everyone here for all your hard work on helping to navigate all this. Also, I really appreciate everyone's comments. Just felt like there was enough comments that's we'll send out, Becca, after you make some of those adjustments, another draft that'll be ready to go, that we can be ready to vote on that in April. So please, when we do send that out, take a really close look at that, and just be prepared. We're gonna vote on it, and just let us know if there's any additional feedback between now and then. But Becca, yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate all your great work on this. Very important stuff. We have until 1 o'clock, so I don't want us to get cut off. I know there is public comment too at the end. So this is really an opportunity for our roundtable kind of updates for folks. I know that there's been some discussions on what the federal executive orders, how that could impact certain departments or nonprofits and you name it. So for any of your updates, feel free to share what you'd like to share, obviously, but I know that there is some interest in understanding how some of the federal actions are impacting you, on the ground in your teams. So anyways, with that, I'm happy, why don't you just either raise your hand or let me know kind of what updates you want to share. And I definitely have a few updates from the DNR, but we'll move to everyone else first. Christina.
I'll give some updates quickly for the State Forest Service. So as far as executive order impacts, we are still awaiting any guidance from USDA as well as our university, so the Colorado State University. But up to date, we haven't received any stop work orders for our traditional forest management projects. And then the more fun, positive update, the nursery is under construction. So just want to say thank you to the U.S. Forest Service Regional Office, to the Department of Natural Resources and the state legislature for that support. And we're going to plan a groundbreaking ceremony. The date is forthcoming and we are working on scheduling that. So more to come on that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. Vaughn.
Yeah, I just thought it'd be good to go after State Forest Service. On the federal items, as far as the grants and agreements, we're not seeing any immediate impacts right now, but a couple things just to get on folks' radar. One, we've kind of got a short-term stop here on our master agreement with the federal agencies, which has some impacts both on the suppression side and the response, as well as on the prescribed fire and fuel side as well. So our current agreement is in place, but being able to move forward on the next one is on hold. We do have a DFPC hired fuels module up in the Arapahoe Roosevelt that we staff with federal funding, and we're doing fuels work on both sides of the fence. We've been really kind of ramping up some air curtain burner work, so we're doing some good things. Again, no stoppage in that, but we are. We're in our the Forest Service partners at the regional office have been great. They don't know a lot, but so we're just keeping an eye on that moving forward. And then I think maybe the only other thing of related note would be from a recruitment and retention standpoint, I would say we continue to tread water and hold our own. But obviously, I think when we look at both the fire and forestry side, obviously some of these efforts we've been working on need to continue forward for everybody. So I'll end it with that. Thanks for the time.
Great. Thank you, Vaughn. Appreciate that. Other updates, John.
Yeah, so I can't really tell you a whole lot. As you know, the Secretary of Interior was just sworn in on Saturday. So all these executive orders have to go through him and then to the director of the BLM, which is enacting, and then down to the state. So we're basically in a huge holding pattern. As of right now, I can tell you a few things, like our NOFO's notice of funding opportunities were pulled back. Those are no longer out for people to apply for, and there's no new awards for agreements. Contracts can still go forward if they're for certain things. And there's a hold on bill and IRA money at the moment as well. So that's about it. Until we get more guidance, we're kind of just in a huge holding pattern. So that's it for us, for me.
Yeah, thank you, John. I appreciate that. Clyde.
Yeah, from a county standpoint, we're also business as usual because we're buffered by the state financially on some of the grants. So until we hear, more direct guidance, business as usual. From a fire mitigation standpoint, we have almost no snow. Snow level here in southwest Colorado is about 10 to 11,000 feet. And we have crews out. Our HOA here has crews out thinning and chipping right now. So we haven't slowed down through the little bit of snow we did get. We kept going. We tend to do that through the winter as long as we don't have snow and it's safe and not too muddy down in the forest. That's it.
Great. Thanks so much. Other updates. Let's see, Katie.
Not a ton of updates. I will post a link to the Colorado Forest Collaboratives Network year in review email. It's just a super quick read if you want to see what we're up to. And we do not have federal funding, so I can't speak for the rest of CSU, but we are pretty insulated at this point from any change.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Okay, other updates, whether it's nonprofit or government. Julie.
Thanks. From the utility space, Xcel Energy just wanted me to share that a reminder that the wildfire mitigation plan is pending in front of the Public Utilities Commission. They certainly welcome people to provide public comment, whether in writing or at the hearings. I'm not savvy enough to drop an informational piece into the chat, although I tried, so I'll share it and hopefully it can email out. The only other update is maybe just to help folks see some progress again on related to wildfire mitigation plan efforts. We have 93 additional camera sites targeted for this year to install additional Pano AI cameras. Our first weather station went up at the end of last year in Colorado, with 25 more weather stations expected by end of this year. Those cameras, again, provide some meteorological information that help the operators of the electric system sort of configure operations and figure out what to do and what's safe. So that's how we are, looking toward the future of how the utilities interact in this space.
Great. Thanks, Julie.
Sure.
Madeline.
Yeah, hi everyone. Julia would just say I was at a meeting in Summit County, and the fire folks up there love those Pano AI cameras and are very grateful for them. So, an incredible success story there. I just share a quick update from Denver Water's perspective. We've had a lot of conversations after the Los Angeles wildfires of the role that water utilities need to play in preparing for fires in the wildland urban interface and in the urban environment as well, including meetings with the Denver Fire Chief and other of our Denver-based fire protection districts. And our CEO, Alan Salazar, published an op-ed in the Denver Post. I'll share a link in the chat as well about our evolving role in this space. Also, just share from the federal contract side, we're certainly supportive of our U.S. Forest Service partners, working through this. We're working on 2 contracts with them that have been put on pause for now, but we're hopeful to get those signed relatively shortly, and just want to offer our support in any way we can moving through that difficult time.
Great. Thank you, Madeline. Okay, other updates.
Maybe I'll just chime in real quick.
Yeah, Brett.
So far, Colorado Forest Restoration suit, our funding is okay, but in general, the research community is pretty decimated right now, writ large across other universities and like Forest Service Research and USGS, all the different research entities, partially because of federal funding, but also a lot of the grant programs have been canceled and changed and moving targets. So just kind of keep in mind and make sure we track that as far as the importance of science and research in forest management and forest health moving forward is something to kind of watch.
Great. Thanks, Brett. Other updates before I move to public comment. I have a few. Does anyone else want to go? Are we good? Okay. A few updates from the Department of Natural Resources. First of all, we're monitoring, with the governor's office. I'm a member of the cabinet and the DNR in general. We're working really closely to monitor all of our federal grant reimbursements that we have for the DNR. We're a pretty large department that includes, everything that you can imagine that deals with land, water, wildlife, minerals, and oil and gas. And we have about, looking at it, kind of a federal lens of, we have about 490 employees that are federally funded. Some of our reimbursements are working, some are not. The ones that are most impacted right now are our Orphan Well program and the Abandoned Mine program. Those are funded through IIJA funds, but so far, for example, our Water Conservation Board, we have a whole flood unit, which is all funded through FEMA funds. There's no impacts to that right now, but we're just, obviously continuing to monitor what reimbursements work, what don't, and through the lens of kind of like forest health of what we do. I'm grateful our co-swap funds are not federally funded right now. They're stateside funded, so there won't be any impacts on that. But for our federal partners here, we've had meetings to discuss how the state can work and collaborate with our federal partners if recreation funding is impacted or whatever it may be. So and then also our co-swap, I mentioned co-swap, our program has awarded 5 new landscape resilient investments. And so what's exciting about that is this is the first year that we've partnered with our Wildfire Ready Watersheds program. And so that's a great, partnership to look at kind of landscape water and kind of community resiliency with our co-swap program. Awesome partnership. So excited about that. And then last but not least, maybe it's a blessing or a curse, I'm not sure. But I was asked to go to Washington, D.C. next week to testify before the Federal Land Subcommittee of the House Resources Committee on the topic of restoring multiple use to revitalize America's public lands and rural communities. So I'm going to really use this as a great opportunity to talk about, shared stewardship that we have in the state, the various different partnerships, for example, with the Bureau of Land Management, with our Arkansas Headwaters Recreation Area. It's a really amazing partnership that we have with our federal partners, but really, highlight the great stuff that we do in Colorado as a good model. So that hearing will be Tuesday, I think 2 o'clock-ish maybe. So maybe we can send out a link or something if you all want to listen in. So that's it for me. And now let's move it to public comment now. I know we have at least one person, we may have some more, but the first person I'm aware of is Bill Tamarco.
Thanks, Dan. And I would just want to thank all of you for the work that you've been putting in on this council for quite some time now. It is appreciated, even though you probably don't hear that often. But I did want to let you know where things stand here in Southwest Colorado. I work for Wildfire Adapted Partnership. We are a 501c3 that's been promoting wildfire education and implementation efforts in the 5 counties of Southwest Colorado since 2003. The majority of our funding is through BLM and federal grants. Archuleta County in particular is the recipient of a CWDG grant, and that funds over 90% of our mitigation treatments that are part of our programs. Those funds were frozen on January 27th, only to be reopened 2 days later. And statements from the White House have promised to delay or cease those programs in the future. BLM has stated that the program that we depend on from them has now been closed. We do have some furworm and co-swap programs in operation in the 5-county region. Durango Fire actually does perform some private property site assessments. The bulk of their assessments and management of their treatment programs is through Wildfire Adapted. In Dolores, San Juan, Montezuma, and Archuleta counties, Wildfire Adapted is the only entity that performs site assessments, implementation planning, and in some locales, property owner reimbursements for treatments. In a nutshell, if the federal government continues to fight against funding congressionally approved, signed agreements like CWDG, Wildfire Adapted will be forced to cease all programs for residents and property owners in the 5-county region. We'll continue to perform education and outreach efforts through our network of volunteer ambassadors as long as we possibly can. As we face an extremely dry fire season, it would be a very bad time to lose these critical programs that are the only avenue for property owners to learn and get assistance towards home hardening and creation of defensible space in a 5-county region. And just to give you an idea, last year we reimbursed homeowners $600,000 for mitigation efforts. These were mostly for defensible space work. We helped 123 communities and protected 865 structures. And as you all know, economic losses and loss of life escalate exponentially when wildfire moves into populated areas. And basically, I just want to get before the council, is there anything that the Forest Health Council can do to help with this situation? I'm sure it's affecting a lot of nonprofits. And here in rural Colorado, we are the only ones doing the work to promote fire-adapted communities. And, I will say that, again, Durango Fire does a little bit of work. They run our programs through us. So things will stop here if we don't get the federal funds, especially the ones that we have signed agreements for. And I don't know if there's any kind of statement or pressure that you guys can put on them, but this is, the nonprofits will cease to exist, basically. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And I'd love to have my team reach out to you to get a better understanding of the federal funds, what they're called, and so forth. So it may be something that I could bring up in Washington, D.C. next week. But our team will reach out to you. Next up, I believe Becca, are you gonna? Okay.
I don't want to follow up Bill and minimize what he was just asking you. I do have a brief other comment, but yeah, it's super expecting to see those kinds of impacts across a lot of our wildfire resilience communities because the major investments in that work have been what's been probably hit the hardest with specific EOs. I don't want to say hit the hardest because there's a lot of DEI stuff, but a lot of it is wrapped in there with those wildfire investments. I know he's talking about the Bill and IRA executive order, as well as the freeze, which was on BLM community assistance specifically for that one. We are, as FACO, also I dropped in the chat, we are collecting network impacts across the state within our wildfire resilience network. So we can also share what we found through your office, Dan, if you want to tell me if I can send those to Allie, if there's another opportunity to wrap those up and communicate them in
That'd be
person.
great. Yeah, I appreciate that.
So I can do that. I just wanted to say I was excited listening in on some of the legislative stuff, and I've been engaged a little bit with Rob and Brendan on the prescribed fire stuff. And I sense a lot of pushback on supporting anything that has funding tied to it. And so I just wanted to maybe urge or encourage this group of people when you have the opportunity to think about something like that for its cost savings and all of this proactive work for the cost savings that it's going to yield. And maybe it's not the right year to start new funds, but at least establishing them with the intent that something like a prescribed fire backstop kind of a fund should be enabling as well as the liability piece and giving certified burners a little bit more security and clarification on that aspect. Should get more prescribed fire on the ground when, wind conditions and everything is right for it and reduce our firefighting response costs in the long run. So I just want to put a plug on that it's a really, really pretty small pot of money, a lot less than buying cameras to try to put out every fire when we think about proactive use compared to, let's put out more and leave the fuel up close next to our communities. So I just wanted to make that point with y'all.
Great. Thank you, Becca. That's important. I appreciate that. Are there other public comments or general updates? I see Clyde, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say, thanks, Bill. And as we go through time, if these freezes are expanded or clarified or whatever happens here, if they are continued, we're going to have contracts out there, the reimbursement contracts, that the work has been done, the contractor's been paid. An HOA or an agency is going to be left holding the bag and can't get paid. So there's a real concern about this reverse. Well, in finance, it'd be called a reverse float because it's you're in the hole already to start with, and you don't get reimbursed. It's a float to the federal government. Anyhow, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Clyde. I know we just have a minute or two left. Are there any other updates? I know we were kind of, I think we're getting cut off at 1. So if there's no more updates, I just really appreciate everyone's involvement in this really important council. I appreciate all the hard work. The legislative session is in full swing, so we'll see how things shake out at the state capitol in terms of the bills that we're working on. But really appreciate to Courtney, Allison, and Roberta. You make my job look easy, so thanks for all the hard work, behind the scenes that you do to help set up these meetings and everything else that goes along with it. So thanks, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. All right, and let's pray for more snow, right? Clyde, you mentioned low snowpack. I think statewide we're like 88% right now, so we need a lot more snow. So bring on the snow if possible. All right, bye-bye.